Waiting on IRI. There we go. Everybody's in here. Okay. Okay. Here we go. All right. Turn that off. Let's get this set up. Okay. What?
A national election sign up in our yard. My little office here, I could put what I want, but my neighbors had big Trump signs. She's like, no, you're not doing it. You can put a flag up. I was like, okay. So.
All right. All right. So I want to welcome our guests, IRI and Rob. Thanks for being here.
Of course. No problem. No problem.
Yeah. And just go over a little bit. I'm here to moderate. We're going to be going over. We're just going to have one topic tonight. This is going to be our first. We'll call it a heavyweight bout on the American Octagon. We have some special mechanics in store for the later. I guess we're gonna postpone. We're gonna do the interim belt at a later date, I guess, because we didn't work out all the kinks in that. So it's still all a work in progress. All of this, of course, is to keep the American Octagon alive while our dearly departed host is away serving his country. So thanks to the Sprouticus. So make sure you go follow Sprout on Twitch and on Twitter. He'll be somewhat involved, and he'll still always be in his Discord, but obviously while he's away and deployed, he can't be doing a lot of politics stuff. I think there's like military restrictions or something like that. I don't know the specifics, but at the very least, he's going to be out of the country. So big shout out to the Sprouticus.
Yeah, thank you, Sprout. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we have IRI who you can. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves because I don't have the full deets. So I'll go ahead and let IRI introduce himself.
Sure. So I go by ImReallyImportant. I've been streaming on Twitch for about 3 years. I consider myself a liberal. I voted for Bernie in the primary and Biden in the general. My channel focuses on Capitol Hill. We like to watch a lot of C-SPAN, check out what's going on in the House and the Senate. I like to hear straight from our elected officials and to let my community hear what the other side's talking about as well. And I just found that's a nice way to do it. There's a lot of drama on Capitol Hill as well. So I'm excited to chat with Rob. We had a nice chat on his stream maybe a week or two ago. So this should be a lot of fun.
Awesome. And Rob, go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Okay, my name's Rob Noerr. I consider myself a populist conservative. My big issue is corruption. I think that both the left and the right and all average people in this country haven't really had a voice in our government for the last 20 years, if not longer. And until we end that corruption, it doesn't really matter if we're disagreeing on things like economic issues and things like that, because you better hope the real movers and shakers in this country agree with your policies, or else your voice won't really matter. I've ran for Congress in 2019. I ran in a special election in District 12 here in Pennsylvania. I do home health care with people with developmental disabilities is my job. I stream almost every weeknight around 8 p.m. Eastern time on Twitch. I'm also on other platforms. And yeah, it's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to it. I do have one quick question about tonight's format. Do we know how long we intend to go? It might influence where we take the discussion.
It's really up to you guys. I have all night. I'm off tomorrow, but I was assuming we would go for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. It all depends on. It's up to you guys, really, at the end of the day. So, if you guys have things you need to take care of, yeah.
Obviously, you're gonna have a different discussion if it's 4 hours versus 1 hour. You know, so I just
yeah.
Curious.
I don't know if I have the energy Rob has, but he does give me a lot of energy when I talk to him. So hopefully we can go at least an hour, hour and a half.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Cool.
All right. And so I'll just lay out how I'm going to do this, or how we're going to do this tonight. I'm going to give the topic, introduce it to you guys, and then I'll give you each, 3 to 5 minutes for an opening statement, and then we'll just open up the floor, and you guys can kind of go back and forth. And the only thing I'll do is just to try to keep it even as far as talking time, and make sure that you guys can hear each other, etc. But I think you guys have said you've already had a conversation in the past. Everything should be pretty good. So, yeah, and we already did the shout out. So, there is no special rules in this bout, but I do want to let everybody know that in the future we are going to have some special mechanics for these, because during the panel for the American Octagon, we have like the cage match and stuff like that. So, just to keep everybody on their toes and wanting more, we are going to have some special mechanics for the future bouts, like the haymaker and stuff. So make sure you keep up. Okay, be there for the next 1v1. Did you have a question?
No, I don't. I just said
Oh.
cool.
Oh, okay,
That's
yeah,
exciting.
yeah. I couldn't hear you. All right, yeah. So our topic tonight: Merrick Garland, the attorney general of the USA, has directed the FBI to effectively label parents who speak out against CRT being taught at schools as domestic terrorists, and that has a potential that the Patriot Act could be used against them, etc. During a Senate hearing, it was brought up that a memorandum was signed by Merrick Garland following a letter from the National School Board Association, and the NSBA has since rescinded the letter. So is this a step too far? Does weaponizing the FBI against its own citizens set a dangerous precedent? Are we comfortable with unelected government agencies targeting their own citizens for political reasons? And how might this affect the midterms in 2022? And will this cause a red wave? We'll go ahead and open it up to IRI to do your opening first.
Okay. Well, this is an interesting situation. I think we can all agree that there are some problems at school board meetings, and school officials are being threatened and harassed, and their lives are definitely being made uncomfortable. And I think that the Department of Justice is just asked to help out. I mean, I took a look at the letter that was sent to them from the National Association of School Boards. I took a look at the memo that Garland eventually released, and I understand there's some contention with the language used in that original letter, and that's fine. I hope we can get into that tonight. But in the end, this is the Department of Justice calling for strategy sessions between federal and local law enforcement, and to develop task force to see if they can help out in any way. And I don't see anything wrong with that. If the federal government can assist these local law enforcement agencies with keeping people safe and avoiding being harassed and such, then I'm all for it. So as far as the impact of that on the 2022 midterms, I think the economy is going to play a much bigger role. I understand that the school board meetings and the raucous around them was influential in Virginia and New Jersey, but I think that's because people have been staying at home with their kids during the pandemic and having a closer eye on what they're learning. And, people are kind of stir crazy too. So they're looking for stuff to go to, and they hear that there's a school board meeting and maybe they go and check it out. So I think the pandemic's kind of in our rear view mirror here soon, and that's not going to be as much of an issue. So that's my jumping off point.
Okay. Rob, I guess we'll go ahead.
All right. Thanks so much. So, yeah, this is actually a far bigger deal than IRI is suggesting, because what this is the weaponization of the FBI, which is basically a Gestapo organization anyways, and they're continuing to go after American citizens that challenge the establishment orthodoxy. Just like we see them being potentially weaponized to go after Trump supporters because they all must have engaged in some sort of insurrection, just like we see them going after, Trump and the people that were in his campaign colluding with Russians, as I've been talking about since 2017, but that's a debate for another topic. This is another example of the Department of Justice and the FBI going after American citizens who seek to challenge an issue that's important to the establishment. the reason that they are so hyperventilating over this is because they understand that they must indoctrinate children very young. And that's what the radical left has been doing for the past 30 years in our country, in schools, K through 12, and certainly in secondary education. And so when you're over the target is when they fight back the hardest. They understand that the average person, even people that hate racism, that hate the legacy of slavery and stuff like that, they don't want this garbage critical race theory stuff and the over sexualization of children, and even things like mask mandates and lockdowns that people are protesting. These things aren't popular. And so because they're speaking out vociferously, you see that the establishment is panicking. So Merrick Garland, first the National School Board Association, said to treat these people like domestic terrorists and use the Patriot Act. And then Merrick Garland, after that weekend, I believe that was released on a Wednesday, the NSBA letter. The following Monday, Merrick Garland read or put his memorandum out there that he actually would have the FBI be collaborating with school boards and local law enforcement. I will get to in this debate how Merrick Garland had no evidence whatsoever to base that decision on. So this is the willful weaponizing of the FBI without any factual basis to do so. The NSBA that he based this decision on actually withdrew their letter. That's how poor it was once they realized how absurd, how upset people were. And we'll see that the FBI has chosen not to get involved in far more serious issues of violence and harassment when the FBI has basically stood back. We'll get to more of that, but real quick, just how will it affect the midterms? I think that this issue has the potential to affect the midterms in two ways. One, the corruption of the FBI that we're going to see even more as the Russia collusion narrative and the corruption of the FBI breaks down. People are going to see just how their government treats them as hostile. But more importantly, parents, even Democrat parents that would vote for things like universal health care, don't want their children being indoctrinated. And the Democrats have subsisted on the culture war for so long. Now that it's turning against them, they're going to try to run. I don't think running to the economy when we're having record inflation and consumer price index is going to help. So,
all right. And before we go into the opening, I just wanted to mention that I do have mods in chat and mods in the American Octagon looking for questions. We were going to try to do some questions for about the last half an hour. If you guys are both okay with that, taking some questions at the end. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, sure. They will be screening questions. So if you have questions, make sure you post them in the chat. You can @ me if you want to, or you can say this is for Rob or this is for IRI, etc. And they'll be screening questions and taking note of that, and then we'll be going through those near the end. So with that being said, yeah, go ahead and the floor is open.
Okay, IRI, if you don't mind, if I get ask you a question.
Sure.
First. Do you see any event where the Department of Justice has had the FBI do this in a similar fashion, or does this seem something pretty unusual to you?
Well, Merrick Garland mentioned that this happened during the election when, or after the election when election officials were being threatened. So I would say it's not exactly unprecedented. It's kind of continuing on that where these school board officials are elected officials. And so, yeah.
But other than via Merrick Garland and via the Biden administration, you can't think of another example?
I mean, nothing comes to mind as far as the Department of Justice saying, hey, let's put together a task force group and see if we can help out local law enforcement. Nothing off the top of my head. I'm sure it's happened over the years. I mean, why not?
I don't think so. I don't think as broad-based as this. I can understand, for example, like, let me ask you, why do you think the FBI would need to get involved? I think let's just nip this in the bud. Both of us will concede any physical violence against any school board person, anything that crosses the line into illegal harassment. I'm against that totally. I assume you are as well. I don't even think we need to.
Of course.
But isn't that what local law enforcement's for?
Yeah, and I think local law enforcement can handle 99% of this stuff. The reason why the federal government's getting involved, from what I understand, is that they have they oversee things like email and things that cross state lines, like phone calls coming from other states, and so that's why the federal government's being asked to be involved in this. And also, this crosses states. It's not happening in just one state. It's kind of a national issue. So, the Department of Justice seems like a good fit to kind of oversee it and help these local agencies identify trends, best practices, learning from other agencies, what's going on over in another state, for example.
But that seems like a cop-out because what we're talking about is individuals behaving poorly. Even Merrick Garland was forced to admit that you're freely allowed to go to a school board meeting and yell at a school board member, right? No one, that's free speech. We all agree with that. So even if what we're talking about would be then individuals behaving in a legal manner. That's not crossing state line. Like, there's no evidence that there was a large movement of people that were seeking to use physical violence or harassment that lived in Ohio but were transferring state lines to go to Pennsylvania. Like, I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that.
Well, I mean, the letter that was sent from the National School Board Association had 20 incidents they listed. I don't know what the details of them, but I imagine there's people that are calling from all over the U.S. to harass these people in different states, especially in Loudoun County, which got a huge spotlight shined on it. I'm willing to bet there's tons of people that called in from across state lines.
Okay, let's say that that's true. You think that would be a bar that if we cross that bar, that there are people from outside of a state that are calling and screaming about local politicians, local elected officials, that warrants the FBI putting out a memorandum that they're going to investigate that?
Not people calling and screaming or engaging, as Merrick Garland put it, spirited discourse, or spirited debate, but death threats. I mean, you can Google right now and see yourself. There have been death threats, there have been harassment, and I do think that would warrant the FBI to be involved, especially after what happened with the elections and people raising the temperature so much. This is just another straw on the camel's back, and this could be the one that finally breaks.
Okay, so I think that's one of the things that we see. It's the constant double standard of these things. Like, and I could prove to you that a double standard is important to you. If we had a town and there were 1,000 in 1 month, there were 1,000 people arrested for jaywalking, and 990 of them were black, you wouldn't find it sufficient to go, well, did those black people jaywalk? If so, you would say, why is there such a discrepancy? Why is law enforcement appear to be going really hard on one subsect? Correct?
Well, I would say that, but I also say what's going on here that there's so much jaywalking is happening. What are the systemic things in place that are leading to that? I mean, I don't think that's an unfair conclusion to come to. I don't think I would just say, why is the FBI targeting these people?
Right, but you would say that there needs to be an explanation for why there is a double standard or a perceived double standard in how law enforcement's going after one group versus the other. Similarly, is anyone with a straight face going to argue that we didn't see both more threats and threats being encouraged or cheered on by higher level people than with the Trump administration and people that consider themselves Trump people? Maxine Waters literally told people to chase people in the Trump administration out of restaurants. Right? Where was the FBI memorandum on, we're going to be working with local law enforcement to make sure that Democrats that are threatening Republicans and things like that in these ways will be dealt with? I didn't see any FBI memorandum there.
Well, that sounds like you're criticizing the Trump administration and the attorney general for not being as proactive as he could have been.
So you would have been for that.
If there were credible threats towards elected officials, then yeah. I mean, remember, Merrick Garland did not just respond to this letter. He testified under oath that he was also responding to news reports and other incidents that haven't happened. It's not just one person saying something. I mean, these are multiple threats that are credible. But okay. I agree. Yes, if it was happening to elected officials in the Trump administration, I'd be all for the Department of Justice getting involved and helping local law enforcement with that as well.
I don't think so. I think even if you would have, I think you could see.
Why?
Let me say, because like, even when Trump suggested sending the National Guard or the FBI national law enforcement to go after rioters that were physically rioting night after night after night in cities all around this country, the official Democratic position on that was this was fascism. It was authoritarianism. That was trying to stop people actually engaged in violence, happening thousands upon thousands of people engaged in this violence across the country. And yet we were told, remember when Tom Cotton wrote an op-ed in the New York Times and said, listen, maybe we need to get the National Guard into places like New York because it's clear the police can't deal with it. And the writers at the New York Times threatened to walk out to where the New York Times actually had to withdraw Tom Cotton's op-ed, all because they said using federal officials to go after these rioters would be fascism. I don't think if Bill Barr would have came out and said, we're going after Democrats, we're going to work with local law enforcement to target Democrats and Democratic organizations, because I read some news reports that there were threats against Trump supporters. I don't think that would have flown. And I think, even if I give you the benefit of the doubt that you would have been okay with it, the vast majority of Democrats would have said, this is authoritarianism.
Well, look, I can't speak for the vast majority of Democrats, but the big difference between the National Guard and the FBI setting up a task force and talking to local law enforcement to assist them with logistics. I don't think the FBI is going in and arresting people here. And even that letter from the Montana U.S. attorney that was quoted by a bunch of people listing the crimes that they could be charged with, even that letter says in it that it's probably best handled by local and state officials and not the federal officials. So nobody is saying that the FBI should go out there and arrest these people. I mean, we're just looking for them, and I'm going off what the DOJ says is best here to help them out to detect patterns and best practices. But I don't think the FBI is banging down doors and stuff. And also, as far as targeting Trump supporters, like, I don't think there's political affiliation when it comes to threatening school board members. I'm willing to bet that there's probably some loons on the Dem side that are doing that too,
Yeah, but that the issue is an issue that favors the Democrats. Like the Democrat look no further than the Virginia election, right? The official Democrat position on this is CRT is not being taught, but if it was, it would be a good thing, right? And that these school board members, and remember, they're not just protesting CRT. A lot of, if you read that NSBA letter, a lot of it has to do with mask mandates and lockdowns. Those are both Biden positions. Right. So, yeah, there might be people that register Democrat that are doing this, but certainly these are positions that are Democrat positions that people are railing against.
Well, I just want to ask a clarifying question. You
Sure.
said this is official Democrat position. What do you mean by that?
It's the positions of, okay, poor choice of words. It is positions that have been endorsed by the establishment Democrats. Like, well, are you really? Let's cut all the bullshit. I'm not interested.
Can we really say that?
I'm not trying to be vague. Like, are you gonna you would acknowledge that the people that are against CRT, that there are more Democrats that are like, this is bullshit. These parents are wrong. It's not being taught. It's all. We had Obama say it was fake culture war stuff. I mean, we could see what these parents are arguing are basically arguing against things that the Democratic Party is like, no, this is stupid. You shouldn't be arguing against these things.
Well, I think there's general consensus that CRT should not be taught in K through 12 because it's only taught in grad school. It's a legal framework. I mean, if you're saying that To Kill a Mockingbird, which is a book that was banned in a school district recently, is CRT, then that's a whole other discussion. But officially, CRT is not taught in K through 12. So we agree with you guys; it shouldn't be taught. But it seems that our definition of CRT differs.
It doesn't matter. Like, I'm not, look, we could have a 4-hour debate in CRT. I'd be happy to have it. All I'm saying is everyone watching this knows that the narrative out there, and it is true, it's not just a narrative, is the majority of these people that are complaining at school boards, that's seen as being against sort of the ideology of the Democratic Party. It's just true. And it's not just CRT. Let's not kid ourselves. Many of these people in the NSBA's own letter are talking about parents that are furious about mask mandates in school, that are furious about schools not being open. So these parents that are angry at school board meetings, this is seen as an issue that is harmful for the Democrats. So this is a group of people that could swing votes away from Democrats. And that's why the FBI is being utilized.
Well, I vehemently disagree with that. There's any political motivation behind that. I don't know how to convince you of that, Rob, but I think that the Department of Justice is an independent agency. It wasn't so much under the Trump administration, but I think historically it's an independent agency that should have some distance from the executive branch. And so I have faith that they are doing their own thing. For example, Rob, they're investigating Hunter Biden still. That investigation's still going on. So, I know the results haven't been what people want on the right, and they're wondering what's going on, but it's not like Joe Biden shut that down on day one, So, I do believe that they're treating things not in a nonpartisan matter. So you may believe this is a issue that's bad for us on the left. I think, as I pointed out in my intro, that parents have spent the last 18 months paying a lot more closer attention to their kids because they can see what's going on the Zoom calls, and they're questioning some of the curriculum, and they're being told that, hey, this is anti-white or racist in some ways, and so they're expressing themselves, and some of them are taking it a little too far and going beyond spirited debate and throwing blows and calling people and saying they're going to kill them. So that's why the FBI is involved.
First, I'll say this. If the Democrats were smart, they would leave someone like you speak more for them than someone like Joy Reid or Terry McAuliffe, et cetera, because the Democrats need to run from this issue because they will get crushed if they keep saying, oh, this is fake culture war stuff and you're white supremacists if you're against that. They're going to get crushed. So I'm hoping if you're out there and you're listening and you're Democrat, little piece of advice to you, don't run on that. You're going to get crushed. So say, parents have the right to be concerned. That's the correct argument to be making. But as far as the idea of the past DOJ investigated Trump over and over and over again. The FBI showed how corrupt we now know. It's beyond dispute that there was Russia collusion. It was the form of the Hillary Clinton camp that was working with a Russian spy named Igor Dachenko, who's since been arrested, who was feeding information about Russia collusion to Igor Dachenko, who then Hillary Clinton's team was paying Fusion GPS to hire Christopher Steele to talk to the very same Igor Dachenko to then funnel the evidence to the FBI to investigate Trump for 4 years. So the idea that this wasn't partisan, we could see how corrupt the FBI was. The Inspector General report showed over and over how the FBI went as light as possible on the Hillary Clinton investigation and as heavy as possible on the Trump investigation. We've seen people at the head of the FBI, the CIA, etc., like John Brennan, James Comey, McCabe, Rosenstein, and the things they said going after Trump. So now, excuse me if I don't trust that given this track history. Heck, we saw the FBI set up a sting with a kidnapping of Whitmer, that it turned out that 2/3 of the people involved in the kidnapping of Whitmer that were coming up with this plan were FBI agents or informants. So it's clear that the FBI and the DOJ is going in an uneven end to this. And I could prove it to you. I think that I could prove it to you. Because you're saying, okay, I'll leave you respond. I don't want to suck up all the time. Go.
Well, I just want to say you're pointing out a few high profile incidents, and I'm not going to try to fight with you on the facts of those. I have a difference of opinion on them, but the FBI is an agency of 35,000 people or so. They've got tons of investigations going on. I can't imagine the thousands of cases they deal with, some not as high profile as the ones you mentioned, but these people do a lot of good work that we never hear about. And I understand if there's a few cases that make it out, and I think there are things that go wrong at the FBI, but I believe overall, just overwhelmingly, this is a positive agency that is non-political. And I understand you've got some examples to point to say no otherwise, but I have faith in them, and I believe that they do a lot of stuff we don't know about. I mean, do you disagree?
That's like saying that you could have had the Jim Crow South. The police there could have been damn good when it came to fixing tires, that people blew a tire on the side of the road, and stopping domestic disputes. But if the high profile shit was unfairly targeting black people, yeah, they got to go, right? I don't care that they did a good job on those other issues. We spent 4 years hyperventilating about the idea that Russians could interfere in our elections and sway elections, right? You took that as credible, right? Most of the Democrats took that as a serious allegation, right?
I did not accept that as fact. Again, I know I'm an outlier here, but I waited for the Mueller report. I do think there was some stuff in the Mueller report that shows some attempt, at least, at collusion with the Trump camp, but I don't want to relitigate that.
We don't have to relitigate. That's not what I'm saying. First off, you know that you're in the minority when it comes to the Democrats and how they felt about that issue. But second, I'm not even saying whether or not you thought Russia collusion happened. The allegation of Russians interfering would be a serious allegation, correct?
Of course.
Okay, well, the implication there is because if there is a powerful entity that is putting their thumb on the scale of our elections and our system, that could usurp the will of the people, right?
Of course, yeah. It's
getting
involved in the election in a way other people can't.
So what would have more effect potentially? A corrupt Russia trying to interfere or a corrupt FBI?
I assume a corrupt domestic agency like the FBI.
Right, and that's why I'm saying. So I'm not going to relitigate the Russia collusion with you. I'm not doing that. But what I'm saying is to say, yeah, but if that was just high profile, there was other stuff that they could do that would be good too. That could be true. I won't dispute that. But if that high profile stuff is as I'm saying it is, that's enough to not trust them when it comes to other political things like what we see with the Merrick Garland. Now, let me go with why I think I can try to prove to you that this is political. What is the threshold that you outlined for why Merrick Garland did this? And I'm trying to steelman you. You said because it was something that was kind of across the country and it could have crossed state lines, and there were a lot of allegations of people potentially threatening school board members.
Right. Also, email and phone calls, which are covered by the federal government.
Now, you would admit, though, that those emails, phone calls, and while that could all be serious, no doubt, that would be less serious than if we saw actual examples of physical violence, which are very scant when it comes to this issue.
I don't know the degree of physical violence, but one incident is too many in my book.
Okay. Right. But we'll get to what the incidents were. But I'm just asking you, if you had one organization that was issuing a lot of threats, and you had another organization that was issuing threats and were engaged in property destruction, violence, etc., you would say that second organization would probably be something more serious to look into, correct?
Well, I think I see where you're going here, Rob. And I would say that the FBI and Department of Justice should have been involved in seeing what was going on then, too. Of course. Why not?
But they didn't. In fact, the head of the FBI said that, let's just take one of those organizations, said that
You're
Antifa
talking
doesn't
about
exist.
the Trump. But this
No,
happened under the Trump administration.
Who's in charge of the FBI when here just a few months ago they said Antifa is just an idea?
Who's in charge of the FBI? You're talking about Christopher Wray?
Yeah. That's
Yeah, he was
Biden's chief of the FBI.
He was appointed by Trump.
Okay. Nonetheless, he's there now under Biden. Merrick Garland's the DOJ under Biden. If Merrick Garland, because here's the argument. Forget about Trump. Let's not talk about Trump. Your argument is Trump's DOJ did a bad job. Fine. Let's not talk about him then. Let's talk about
That's
Merrick
your
Garland.
argument. That's your argument.
No, well, no,
You said that they did not investigate the rioters, right? That's what your point was. They did not investigate the rioters. Okay,
Right.
so in your eyes, the Trump administration's Department of Justice failed to protect the American people.
That's true, but you're saying that as well, because when I asked you, why did the Department of Justice and the FBI in the past not do these? Can you give me an example? And you said, well, that was their fault. Maybe they should have. That's what you said, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe they should have. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's forget about them. They're not there. Merrick Garland's there now. Merrick Garland, the day he walked in, could have said, man, Antifa, they've been rioting in Portland over and over again. They set up a Chaz zone where they murdered a young African-American kid. There were all sorts of allegations of sexual assault and extortion that happened there. We have actual Antifa organizations all around. And yet he allowed his director of the FBI under his watch to go out and say, it's not a real thing, it's just an idea. And he never wrote a memorandum suggesting that the FBI would get involved with local law enforcement. Now, it wasn't just threats that people in Antifa were sending, though there were certainly many of them, some of them that you could see publicly, but there was actual violence, rioting, attacks, and a murder. So why would it be that Merrick Garland would say, well, I feel that I have to go out of my way and get the FBI involved with local law enforcement to deal with angry parents where we don't see these examples of violence. But when we see examples of violence so bad that local law enforcement can't handle it, no need for a memorandum. We'll just say that doesn't exist.
Are you saying that there was rioting recently done by Antifa in these major cities? Because I'm not aware of that, if that's the case.
Portland and Seattle had riots all through the Biden administration, particularly the first couple months.
Well, I think you're implying that Merrick Garland is picking and choosing which groups to go after. And in this case, he's chosen the parents that are going to school board meetings because they are on the right. I mean, is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, because I'm saying when we could see two analogous situations and one is worse, and yet they refuse to go after the worst one. And in an unprecedented way, they go after these parents, which, as you admitted, Merrick Garland's the only example you could think of doing something like this. It seems to be an outlier. And so we should say, well, what's the precedent? What did they do in other similar situations? And he did nothing. That's what he did.
So the precedent here is that elected officials are being threatened.
So look at that.
So that is a much bigger deal. That is a much bigger deal for the federal government. That's a bigger deal for the federal government to get involved. I mean, this is a way bigger deal for elected officials. I do not think these two are analogous. Now, if there was a case for the FBI, they could have helped out, and federal law enforcement could have teamed up with local and state officials to quell the rioting, and there was some threats there. Okay, that's one thing, but I don't think these two situations are analogous at all.
Okay, first off, it's a distinction without merit, because just because someone's an elected official doesn't mean that the FBI gets involved in that situation, but wouldn't if it was an unelected official. For example, if 10 people yell at an elected official, we're coming to get you, that's serious, I understand, but that wouldn't warrant the FBI because they don't need that manpower when local law enforcement could do it. But if we saw non-elected officials getting their property destroyed or being attacked over and over, so much so that local police had to stand down, then you could understand the FBI getting involved because local law enforcement wouldn't have the manpower. And secondly, just real quick, they were threatening officials. Go to Ted Wheeler's, who, by the way, stuck up for Antifa, mayor of Portland, right? There's video after video of them Antifa chasing him into his house, threatening him. They're threatening to burn down public property in the form of police precincts and other government buildings. They're storming ICE buildings. Those are government buildings. So yes, they are going after state business, except they're actually using violence. They're issuing the threats and using violence. And you can't give me a reason why Merrick Garland would get the FBI in an unprecedented way after parents, where we don't see these examples of violence, but he chose to allow the organizations that are going after state things. He chose to not get the FBI. You can't give me a reason why that would happen.
But you can't give me a reason why he would choose this one and not that one.
Sure,
You're just saying
because it's political.
he's doing it for political reason. You're guessing as much as I'd have to guess why he chose not to go after those other groups. You're filling in the gaps just as much as I would fill in the gaps to try to give you a reason why. I mean, how can you stand on 2 feet and say, without being in Merrick Garland's head, without working at the Department of Justice, without understanding the inner workings of them, and say that's the only reason why they're going after these guys is for politics, and they chose purposefully not to go after those other groups? You don't know that. They may have not done it publicly. They may have done it privately, and we'll never know. I don't know. You don't know.
Okay, all right. If you're going with this argument, you're losing the debate pretty bad. And here's why. Because you could literally say that about everything. We don't know what's in it.
Of course you can.
So you
of course you can.
Right. So you would say if you were debating a lefty right now and they were like, I think Trump had the ban on people coming from countries because it was a Muslim ban because he hates Muslim. You would have said here and said, no, we can't say that. We can't say that. We can't criticize Trump because we don't know what is. You were against the impeachment of Trump, right? Because you couldn't know what was in his head, right? That's what you said.
This is the difference between me and what you're straw manning. I don't go around telling people what to do or to say, Rob. I'm one person. And I think you are basing all of these arguments off an idea of what you think the left is, whether that's through your media or wherever you're consuming. I'm a real person, man. I'm not a freak. There are a lot of people like me. I understand that the loudest wheels, they're the ones who get all the attention, the squeaky wheels. But there's a lot of people that are normal, just like me, who don't sit around and think these things.
I mean, who's saying you're not normal? I'm attacking Merrick Garland. When I'm talking to you, I'm saying specifically, if we adapted the mentality that you're saying here, you couldn't have criticized Trump for anything. For example, were you for the impeachment of Trump, the first impeachment?
Yes.
So
the Ukraine affair, yes.
Right. You think
I think he tried to pressure that. I think he tried to pressure the president of Ukraine to get information and
to help him politically.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Prove it. Prove that was what was in his head.
Well, we have witnesses under.
They don't know what Trump was
testified as such.
They don't know.
They
what
were
Trump
on the
was.
phone
No one
call
testified
with
to
him.
that.
They testified to what they heard.
I read the transcript. The transcript doesn't say what Trump was thinking. It is entirely possible Trump could have said, I feel that there was a crime committed by the Obama administration and it needs investigating.
Here's the difference. I have this testimony and this story of people coming forward under oath. You just have what you're making up in your head that the FBI did nothing. You don't know that. You don't know if the FBI did not investigate. We just don't know. Maybe they chose to go public with it this time to try to nip it in the bud. I don't know. I don't know why the FBI does what it does. But you have no proof that they did not investigate Antifa rioters.
They said it was imaginary.
What was imaginary?
Antifa. It's just an idea.
You're talking about the director of the FBI, I believe, saying that Antifa is not an organized group of people. It's an idea that some people accept and do whatever by. Which
and the context.
Okay, so tell me this, Rob. If Antifa is an organization, who are the leaders?
Well, it doesn't matter. ISIS is an organization without leaders. They have cells, right?
They have leaders.
We can see, for example,
we smoked a bunch of them. What do you mean?
Right.
There's always leaders.
We could say the same about Antifa. We could say the same about Antifa. You can go to all sorts of their actual social media posts, like Rose City Antifa, Atlanta Antifa, right? You could go and they have members that are actually posting. Just because there might be 40 people in a particular chapter and they don't have minutes where they've elected a president doesn't mean that it's not an organization. But it's really not the point. What I'm saying is,
you're talking about a bunch of edgelords on Facebook getting together, wearing all black and causing problems. I mean, really? Is this some sort of organized effort? I mean, I could go get 3 buddies and are we Antifa now if I go to a protest in all black and I'm like, I'm Antifa?
So are you suggesting that they're less of an organization than angry parents that show up and yell at school boards? Are they organized? Who's the leader of these parents? Who's the leader of these organization? Parents?
They're not an organization.
But the FBI was able to announce that they were going after them.
But the FBI did not say that they're an organization. Nobody's claiming they're an organization. What do you mean?
Look, the point is, it's quite simple that we could see that Merrick Garland chose to go after one of these groups and chose to not go after the other. It's saying, well, maybe he did in secret is nonsense, because that would mean that we could never criticize anyone for anything because we could say we don't know what's going on in secret. Now, I would, if you don't, okay, I'll leave
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm basically done with this portion of it. I want to talk specifically about the evidence that warranted.
Can I have a line of questioning?
Yeah, sure.
I want to talk about this domestic terrorist part, because I think that this, and I think you mentioned it as well, that this is being used by the Department of Justice to label these parents as domestic terrorists. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that was part of it. So.
Okay,
There were two
so
things. Go ahead. Yeah.
that was language used by the National School Board Association that they have since apologized for. Now, I want to correct you, and you can tell them if you think I'm wrong, but I read through their statement after they published that. They apologized for some of the language, not the sentiment, not the letter in itself. They still believe they're being harassed and there's death threats. And yeah, they chose some poor language there by saying that perhaps some of these people could be considered domestic terrorists with what they're doing. But I mean, some of these people are terrorizing these school board officials, so I don't think it's that much of a stretch. But Merrick Garland was very careful. It doesn't say anywhere in his memo that these people are domestic terrorists at all. So again, I think his whole memo is just about setting up a task force and meeting with state and local territorial officials to see if the FBI can help in any way. But I defer back to that memo from the U.S. Attorney in Montana, who said, look, I think most of this can be taken care of by state and local. If you think they can be charged with something else, let us know if we can help. I mean, that's essentially what the DOJ's involvement has been here. Do you disagree?
Well, first off, we have to understand that the DOJ's involvement is unprecedented. No one other than Merrick Garland, and I'm willing to see an example in history, has taken this step to have the FBI collaborate with local law enforcement for something that there's so scant evidence of, particularly when it's just a group as broad as parents angry at school boards. That's the group that the FBI is now analyzing. That's never happened in history. So it is serious. If you want to interject, that's fine, but I got more to say on that.
Why is unprecedented bad?
Because it means that it is an abuse of power, or that it is.
Why does that?
Let me not put it. Okay, that's loaded language.
It is
an increase in federal power that we have not seen in the past.
Okay, what's wrong with that?
Well, if it's being used for political reasons, or if it's being used with bias, that would be something that would be horrible. And I don't want to live in a society where I'm lumped in as being a potential target of the FBI just because I'm criticizing people that are teaching my children. And I think most of the country will agree with me.
I would agree with you as well. And Merrick Garland would too, because he says in his memo that spirited discussion is valid and should always happen. But it's threats of violence and harassment that are unacceptable. I think you would agree with me on that, right?
Well, but again, there's no organization in this country that hasn't had that's any prominent whatsoever. Shit, we could even talk about sports organizations that don't get death threats and threats. Like that, but we don't get the FBI involved in that, right? The only reason the FBI would get involved is if we see that it is so substantial, it's so out of the ordinary that local law enforcement's being overwhelmed, and so they need to get involved. And so when we're looking at this specifically, like it's not as simple as you're putting it, like in a vacuum. Well, Merrick Garland didn't use the word domestic terrorist. Merrick Garland admitted that the preponderance of the reason he did this was the NSBA letter. The NSBA letter said you should treat these people as terrorists and use the Patriot Act. Then 4 days later, Merrick Garland comes out and says, "Yeah, we're having the FBI look into this."
Hold on, Rob. He testified under oath at the Senate Judiciary Committee recently that it wasn't just the letter that was part of it, but it was also these news stories he's seeing, these accounts that have been pointed out to him. So it wasn't just the letter. That was part of it, but that was not the sole reason why. Well, how do you come up with that?
Well, okay.
What do you mean at least 50%? Where do you even come up with that?
Well, he cited two things, news stories and the NSBA letter. And you and me both know if it was just news stories, he wouldn't have done this 3 days after the NSBA letter. The NSBA letter was the trigger that convinced him to do this. We now know that the letter was being written in conjunction with people in the Biden administration. So people from the National School Board Association were actually in communication with people at the Biden administration. And it just, you want me to believe that 4 days after, it just so happened that Merrick Garland's like, what was he watching? MSNBC. He was watching Rachel Maddow. I'm like, damn, there's a story about some angry parents at a school board. I better send the FBI. That's what Merrick Garland was doing. Is that any better?
Well, I mean, he said under oath that it was these incidents that were brought to his attention. It wasn't just the letter. He did mention the letter influenced him as well. But I do want to also, you said that they worked in conjunction. The National School Boards Association worked in conjunction with the White House. I read that there was communication. That could be them communicating with an intern who answers the phone. I don't know what that entails. You don't know what that entails. People are making it seem like they had meetings in the Oval Office for weeks and worked with Biden on this and Merrick Garland. We have no idea what those communications entailed, Rob.
I agree with that. We don't, but we do know that there was some form of communication with the White House. And so I would assume that that means that people higher up at the White House probably at least had a cursory knowledge that this was going on. And I will fully concede, though, I don't know what the level of that communication was, but you should also concede, because all of us know it wasn't just a weird coincidence that Merrick Garland waited until right around the time of that National School Board Association letter to issue his memorandum. That's why he issued the memorandum, because the NSBA letter. That's why he did it. If they wouldn't have wrote the letter, he wouldn't have issued the memorandum.
He might not have issued it at that time, but he could have been working on this for weeks. I don't know. But he attributes the letter as well, so I'm not denying that. But you're giving it the weight of 50%. I don't know what percent it is, but it doesn't matter anyways. All the letter says...
One of two things.
But he didn't use the language domestic terrorists or whatever in his memo. So it doesn't matter what they put in that letter alerting him to the problems they were facing. And by the way, they represent 14,000 school boards. So yeah, if I get a letter like that and I'm Department of Justice and I hear that 14,000 organizations across the United States that impact children is under threat and needs my help, yeah, I'm probably going to jump at that, you know?
Well, they withdrew the letter, and we'll get to real quick, because
they did not withdraw the letter. They did not withdraw the letter. Their apology says they apologized for the language in the letter. They did not withdraw the letter.
I just want to say, if an organization that you usually consider on the right, like the NRA, was to write Bill Barr a letter saying, we think you should treat people criticizing us with the Patriot Act as domestic terrorists, and then 4 days later, Bill Barr came out and said, we're going to have the FBI looking at threats of the NRA, the left would have lost their mind. Maybe not you, but Maxine Waters and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We all know that's the truth. They would have. But what I want to talk about specifically...
Probably.
Right.
Probably.
So I think you can see where we're coming from, while it looks really bad that he cited a letter calling Americans domestic terrorists that were challenging school board members, and said that we should use the Patriot Act against them. And then he, in response to that, immediately is like, yeah, we're going to send the FBI to look into it.
Okay, that was like on the third page of their letter in a paragraph at the bottom, and it listed some other organizations and laws that could be applicable too. You're making it seem like the first sentence was, these people are domestic terrorists and you should use the Patriot Act to listen to all their phone calls and their emails tomorrow. It was one of like 5 things listed on page 3 in a paragraph towards the bottom. So the importance of this point was pretty small to them, if that's the case.
Okay, so anyways, I want to get to go in junction with what we're talking about here. You say that Merrick Garland cited news stories. Name one. Name one of the news stories he saw that justified the FBI getting involved.
He did not say. I listened to his testimony in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he did not give a specific one.
Okay, now will you admit that Merrick Garland, he did say he looked at the NSBA letter, right? He admitted under oath, at least in front of the Senate, he didn't agree with the terrorist Patriot Act portion, correct?
I believe so, yeah. I don't remember his exact wording, but yeah.
He did. Okay, the only other part of the letter, you have the first part of them saying, oh, we think that we need to use the feds to go after these people. The second part of that letter is about 20 cases that they cite, right? And they have links to them in the NSBA letter. Did you read those links?
I did not look at them. I looked at some of the stories, but I did not look at them. I know they're mostly
how many of them included violence?
Yeah, they're mostly harassment and death threats.
One. How many included arrests?
Arrests? I don't know.
Yeah. 2. Now, you know what one of those cases were that they cited? One of 2 that most of them, they just said like this. This is how it goes most of the time. There are cases of harassment in Virginia, Maryland, and California. And then when you link on the news article, it says school board meeting had to be closed down early because angry parents yelling about mask mandates. That's it. That's what the NSB, that's what most of these are. The only 2 cases that they sought to really drag out was a case in Illinois where someone was arrested for assault. Okay, that's serious, but that's one case. Hardly the FBI getting involved. And another case where some belligerent jerk went into a school board meeting and was forced to be arrested because he was being belligerent. That was the second one. You want to know what case that was?
Let me guess. The father in Loudoun County.
Right. So they cited as at least one of the 2 biggest incidents they were talking about where an arrest was made because a father's daughter was raped by a transgender student in the bathroom.
Okay.
And he went there and listened to, real quick, he went there and listened to the school board say, nothing's happened in any of these restrooms. He started yelling and said, what about my daughter? Another woman activist who was a trans activist said, your daughter's lying. And he said, shut up, bitch, and was arrested for that. And that's what the National School Board Association cites as a reason that we need to treat people with the Patriot Act as domestic terrorists, etc.
I I think what happened to that father's daughter is despicable, and I hope the full force of the law comes down on that young person who did that. But does that father have a right to disobey the police? I watched the video of him being arrested and taken down to the floor, not the moments after, but the police told him to stop. He was getting in people's faces, and he disregarded their commands, and he fought with them, so they took him down, and outside he continued to yell, "I'm going to kick your teeth in." Do you have a right to do that just because your daughter was attacked? Do you have a right to attack the police? Is that what you're saying? That it wasn't right what happened to him?
I didn't see him arrested for attacking police. That's not what he was arrested for.
You should watch the video. The cop is grabbing his arm and he's pulling away and he's pushing him away and he gets arrested. You think the cops just arrest you for yelling at somebody?
I don't even have to argue this point. We could see that morally he was justified in what he was doing and that the cops should have been going after.
No, he wasn't. He was not morally justified.
You might say legally he wasn't, but morally he certainly was.
Are you kidding me?
Yes,
no, he wasn't. You have no right to fight with the cops. I don't care what happens in your life. Bullshit. You have no right to put the cops in harm's way like that. Those people are there protecting us, and he has no right to get physical with the cops.
He did not attack the police. He resisted. He didn't punch the police. He didn't kick. He didn't spat at them or anything like that. He was fighting getting handcuffed. He was fighting getting handcuffed because people were covering up the rape of his daughter. But it's irrelevant anyways. What does that have to do with
man resisting the police?
What does that have to do?
Is that what you're defending?
So your argument is
resisting the police?
No one can hear when we talk off. You guys have been awesome. Okay, so all right, go ahead and interject.
I'm just saying, it sounds like Rob is defending resisting the police and getting physical and telling cops it's okay, I'm going to kick your teeth in. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. It's weird that I'm in the position of defending the police here.
I'm not defending his actions legally. If he took actions that were not legal, then sure, they arrested him. I'm defending his actions morally. That if someone raped my daughter and then it was covered up and the people were basically laughing in my face as they covered it up, and then the cops tried to arrest me because I was calling them out, then yeah, morally he didn't have the right to morally he wouldn't have the right to try to cause grievous harm to the police, but to struggle against the police so that his daughter's voice could be heard. Sure, I think that morally he had that right. It's irrelevant anyways. Because it doesn't matter so you're saying because he was arrested, well, then the National School Board Association was right to use this as an example of why the FBI needs to get involved. Because an angry father resisted arrest as he was screaming at a school board covering up the rape of his daughter. Well, I guess the FBI needs involved now, right?
One case, I would say no, but obviously there's a pattern of this stuff, and we don't want to let more than one case ever happen. If it happens once, that's one too many times for me. I'm sorry, Rob, but when this is on national television and people are talking about it all day long for hours and hours and hours, I want the Department of Justice involved in order to prevent that from happening again, because people like what you just described will go, well, I'm morally justified in resisting the police at my school board meeting too, because I feel something that happened to me or my kids is bad too.
This is outrageous. Saying one incident, it's outrageous saying one incident, and I can prove it because then
you are justifying one incident. That's ridiculous to me. You're justifying violence.
So this is the world that we're looked at. The FBI is now going to investigate any crime. Anytime someone protests and gets arrested, that entire organization now is going to be looked at skeptically, publicly by the FBI. So, for example, if there are people that are for rights for immigrants, right? They say, we want a better system for illegal immigrants. We're against kids in cages. There were many people that made those messages while they challenged ICE facilities, while they protested, while they removed American flags. Many of those people got arrested. So you now agree that Merrick Garland should release a memorandum saying, we are having the FBI work in conjunction with local law enforcement to scrutinize and look into anyone who protests for illegal immigrants. You would be for that. You would be for the FBI because one incident is too many, right?
No. I would be for people that are threatening to do that, or people that are doing that going to whatever, the ICE facilities. I would be for the FBI working with local and state officials and territorial officials to make sure there is no violence or destruction of property. Why would I be against that? I'm against violence. I don't think there's ever a moral reason to be a vigilante.
Then why haven't they?
Why haven't they?
Why hasn't Merrick Garland released the memo?
I don't come to the conclusion. I don't assume things like you and assume it's all political with no evidence at all, except that there's a lack of something happening. That's not how you make decisions in life. You don't just assume because there's a lack of something else, therefore this person thinks this. Is that real, Rob? I mean, we use
our judgment all the time. Like, for example, you said, well, you assumed what Donald Trump was thinking because people testified. No, not one person. And we could talk about this afterwards. I don't want to eat up all the time on this debate over this. I challenge you, one person that testified in the impeachment at all to say, I know what Donald Trump was thinking. It didn't happen. But
They
you
don't
say,
have to.
well, I believe
they go off the
you've came to-
transcript.
Right. I've read the transcript. Show me in the transcript where it shows Trump said, I want you to go after my political opponent.
I don't have the transcript in front
Right,
of me.
because it
Rob.
doesn't say that, and you know it doesn't say that, right? People just assume.
Well, it doesn't say
oh,
go after my political opponent, but he
Right.
mentions, look, can you look into this? Can you do us a
Right.
favor or whatever he said?
Like, we know the Obama administration, for example, we know 4 senators put a letter
Wait a
out
second.
to real quick.
We're getting pretty far out to sea here away from the point, though.
The point I'm trying to make is impugning your thought process in this, because you're saying, well, we can't question why they selectively choose who to go after. We can't, because we don't know what their thoughts are. But as soon as it benefits your argument, you're totally willing to say, look, it makes the most sense that this is why this occurred. And you impugn the person that you want to say that about. And so I think this line of questioning is just absurd, because one, it's clear that we could.
Once.
Yes,
I
you
haven't
have
done that once. You have
Do you
no
think Donald Trump should have been
example
impeached?
I said yes.
Okay, then you've done that.
So he impeached doesn't mean convicted and found guilty.
What do you think impeached means?
Impeached means there's a case to be made that he did something that is high crimes and misdemeanors, and it's up to the Senate to decide if he's guilty or innocent.
So you think he should have been impeached but not convicted? That's your argument.
I'm not saying that. You asked me if he should have been impeached.
You thought he committed a high crime or misdemeanor because you thought his thought process was abusing our federal aid to go after his political opponents.
Yes.
Okay, that's you assuming what his thoughts were. There is no evidence as to what his thoughts were.
I don't have to, because there's a transcript of a phone call, and there were all these experts who are in that field who said that's exactly what he was doing. These are people who listen to phone calls all the time between world leaders, and they testified under oath. You're going off of something that doesn't exist at all. You don't even have that. You have nothing at all. You just have an absence of something, and you're claiming that's your evidence, the absence of something. That's like, I mean, you might as well say aliens exist. We have no proof they don't exist, or God exists. I have no proof he doesn't exist. What about giants living in Antarctica? I can tell you giants live in Antarctica. You got no proof they don't.
Okay,
all right. Wait, real quick, because now we're getting off topic, but obviously you guys are entertaining this, and I'm loving it, and chat's loving it, everybody's loving it. I just want to take this second to remind everybody that we are going to be taking questions. We're about halfway, or a little past halfway at this point, I guess. And then also, there was mention of another topic that you'd like to talk about. Look, if you guys want to carry on, like I said, I'm off tomorrow. We can go a little longer. That's up to you guys.
We'll see.
So if we want to switch up the topics, and then just to remind that there was a latter half of the topic, but like I said, the people are loving it. So, and you guys are obviously carrying on in spirited debate, loving it, making it easy for me to moderate. So yes, please carry on.
So, I understand you got hyperbolic about this, but it's just nonsense. What it shows is you can't say, well, because experts think they know what Trump was thinking. It's just absurd. The reality is that almost the entirety of political discussions that ever occur is because we're able to decide what someone's doing, whether or not it's a good or bad thing, based on if they're doing it in an even-handed way, and we are able to discuss what that probably means they're thinking. This happens in political discourse all the time. When you're losing the debate so bad that you're saying, yeah, you're right, Rob, Merrick Garland went after them with almost no evidence, these teachers, and we can see that there are many other organizations that have committed much more violence, but for some reason, Merrick Garland hasn't released a memorandum then, but we can't know what Merrick Garland's thinking, so end of discussion. Like, it's just a lazy way of debating, and it's a way that you wouldn't accept if it was an issue you wanted to talk about. You wouldn't accept it. You would say, okay.
Why do you have to frame it as you're losing the debate? What is that about?
Well,
what
it has nothing to do with win or losing. It's per se.
That's
like,
what you said. You interjected this.
Right. Let me finish. I'll explain. You asked a question. I'll explain. It means that you have no ground to defend what Merrick Garland has done here and the double standard that he's engaged in. So you're losing that argument so bad. I don't mean debate as in a game. I mean debate as in this particular argument. You're losing that. You don't have a defense of it. And so you're resorting to, well, maybe Merrick Garland did go after Antifa, and we can't know why he's really thinking why he engaged in a double standard. But it's implicitly admitting that there is a double standard, and it doesn't matter what his thought process is for why he has that double standard. I think that the most logical explanation is when we see this pattern over and over and over again, it makes sense that the double standard is most likely because it's to the political benefit of him and the people that he's entrusted to.
So you have this one case where you are saying they didn't do this for Antifa, so obviously there's a double standard, and you're just willing to write off the entire Merrick Garland Department of Justice because of that?
Well, no, that's not just
Well,
one.
like, what
Antifa,
about
ICE
the fact
protesters,
that-
Black Lives Matter,
okay,
the Democrats that protested people like Rand Paul, Democrats that shut up Steve Scalise. We go organization after women's march.
These are all things that happened under the Trump administration. The
Not
George
totally.
Floyd protest, the Steve Scalise shooting on the baseball field. These are all things that happened under the Trump Department of Justice. Again, it sounds like you have a real problem with the Department of Justice under the Trump administration. But how do you explain that the fact that there are still investigations going on into people like Hunter Biden?
Well, it's not that, one, we know the only reason that there's an investigation into Hunter Biden is because the public pressure, because the story leaked out, not much to the chagrin of the establishment media and everyone that tried to censor the story. So yeah, they're going to investigate it just like they investigated Hillary Clinton. And then like with Hillary Clinton, what did they do? They gave everyone immunity and said, okay, did anybody commit crimes? Oh, they didn't? Well, you all have immunity. See you later. For example, we know that they destroyed subpoenaed evidence. Hillary Clinton's team destroyed subpoenaed evidence, and the FBI said, well, that's okay. We gave everyone immunity. Okay, we're getting way out there. The point I'm trying to make is like, it's clear that the reason, like, it's just frustrating to argue with so many people on the left that just want to give every benefit that, well, yeah, there's a clear double standard. By the way, it's not just Antifa. Black Lives Matter still riots. Antifa still rioted, still issues threats. There are people still issuing threats against people like Matt Gaetz, people issuing threats against Rand Paul. He's been attacked since Biden's been in office. We have people that are issuing threats against ICE agents. We have people that are issuing threats against police. We have people issuing threats against jurists, like in the George Floyd trial. That was under Biden. We have people that are threatening to take pictures of the jury right now in the Rittenhouse trial. So these sorts of things are happening all the time. Yet time after time after time, even when actual violence is occurring, we don't see Merrick Garland come out and say, I'm issuing a memorandum that the local police are going to cooperate with the FBI in looking into the types of people that say these things. Not once has it happened except with teachers that were criticizing school boards. And they didn't provide 1 ounce of evidence to suggest that this is a serious problem. Not one.
Well, you mentioned public pressure has kept the investigation into Hunter Biden. And I would say, look what's happening with public pressure for the school boards. It's on the news every single night. That's what's going on here. So when you have such a high profile series of incidents, the public demands that the government do everything to fix the problem. And so that's why you get this memo from Merrick Garland that has no teeth at all, by the way. It's just saying, I want to set up meetings and have discussions to look in to see how we can help you guys. You're making it seem like they're setting up a whole new agency to go round up parents who are angry at their school boards. And that's just not the case. They said, we want to set up meetings to see how we can back you guys up, help you out if you need our help. That's it.
I mean, it's, again, they base this off of a letter that said that they should treat these people like domestic terrorists. We couldn't even get, like, I'll tell you how bad it is. Now, I know that Merrick Garland was quick to say, oh, no. You could have discourse. You could have disagreement with school board officials. That's not what we're talking about. He couldn't cite one example, not one case. He couldn't cite one case that he said, what we're talking about is this. Like it happened in this city. He just said, I read news reports. Are we okay with the Department of Justice having the FBI target certain groups because the Attorney General says, I watched some news reports? Oh, really? Which ones? I don't have any specifics, but I read some reports.
Oh, well, come on. Now you're putting words in his mouth. I don't remember exactly what he said under oath when he testified in front of the Senate, but he said that he looked into incidents and there were other things brought to his attention. Nobody pressed him to name one. Nobody said name one. Nobody said that to him. I'm
they
sure
asked
he
him
could have.
about specific cases. He said, I don't know about the specifics. And here's the thing.
He said, I don't know about this case or that case, but he said, I had instances that were brought to my attention. I mean, I'm sorry. I trust that he saw some cases and he thought they were credible. I mean, what do you want?
Cory Booker actually started to cite some cases, none of which were violence. It was just like, this person got threatened, this person, right? And Merrick Garland literally said, it was laughable. He said, well, I'm not aware of those. So the only specific cases, every time a specific case was brought up, Merrick Garland said, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I don't know. They even asked him,
there could be 20 other cases he knows about that he didn't talk about. So,
but he didn't, right? And then when they asked him about the NSBA letter, they said, did you read the cases that they outlined? He said, no, he didn't look at those news stories. So all he said was, if it was me and I was Merrick Garland, I said, I think that there are credible threats and that this is important. And let me give you some examples of the news stories that I'm talking. But he didn't say that. He just said, I read news stories. And I'll guarantee you, if Bill Barr would have decided to go after predominantly what we would consider left-wing political groups, because he was like, I read Breitbart and I watched Hannity last night and I watched Tucker Carlson, people would have lost their shit. What you would expect for the FBI to take an unprecedented action like this, or the Department of Justice to take this unprecedented action, would say, we had an internal review. I instructed the FBI to look into this, and we saw that there were 273 cases that we thought were bad, and so that's why we decided, because the volume of the cases, that we would get involved. Not, I listened to news reports. That is outrageous. And any civil libertarian should think that anybody who's worried about an abuse of law enforcement should say, my God, the chief law enforcement officer in this country is instructing the world's most powerful investigative agency to go after people and to look at people with scrutiny based on, and I'm quoting, news reports? That's outrageous.
Well, hold on. You said go after people. There are no going after people. Again, I want to reiterate the memo from Merrick Garland says for the U.S. attorneys and the Department of Justice to go work with local officials to help them up, set up a meeting and a task force to talk about how they can back them up. The U.S. attorney from Montana, who listed all the things that people could be charged with, if the state and local officials can't handle it themselves, okay? And also, what is this new standard that you've created for the Department of Justice opening an investigation? You don't work at the Department of Justice, and who are you to create this standard that, well, if I was the Attorney General and if I wanted to legitimize an investigation, I would have to identify 6 cases that show violence so that I can have my troops sent out. I mean, come on, Rob. You don't know what goes into the decision-making process. All you have is the testimony of our Attorney General when questioned by people in a Senate Judiciary Committee and his memo. That's it. You don't know the inner workings of the FBI or the Department of Justice. How can you say that they don't have proper standards?
Well, I can say because I can see evidence of them being corrupt over and over again. But aside from that, it's irrelevant if I have the inner workings, because you know what I have? The fact that even you admitted that this is unprecedented, right? So what you're saying could make sense if it was like, well, the DOJ does this all the time. They're always issuing these memos to go after these groups like parents, right? Let me ask you this. If Merrick Garland comes out tomorrow and releases the exact same memo, but includes the words Black Lives Matter instead of parents at school board, you're cool with it?
If he says that there are instances of death threats and violence, yes, of course I'd be cool with that.
Well, there
Why
are.
wouldn't I be?
You know that. There are people under the name of Black Lives Matter that have been arrested for violence. You know that, right?
Look, I'm not trying to defend
this isn't
that.
a gotcha, right? Okay, so then
What do you mean? I don't know, Rob. I cannot list one instance of somebody committing violence on representing Black Lives Matter. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, wait a minute. What cares if they represent Black Lives Matter? No one committed violence representing the nation's parents angry at school boards. We saw violence with people that had that ideology, and therefore Merrick Garland said, we are going to have the FBI look into this. The same would be true of Black Lives Matter. They don't have to say Black Lives Matter, the organization. They could say people that are upset about the death of George Floyd and racial injustice.
Rob,
in fact, that would be even better. You cool with that? Merrick Garland releases a memo tomorrow that says, we are aware that there have been threats and there has been violence for people that are upset about racial injustice in this country. And so the FBI will be working with local law enforcement to look into groups that are upset about racial injustice. You're cool with that?
If there have been death threats and violence,
sure there
hell
have.
Yeah.
We know there have. What do you mean if? What do you mean if? We know there have. That's not disputable.
Rob,
We've seen arrest after arrest.
You're saying that because they're not doing this one thing, therefore this other thing isn't justified. That's not how life works.
That's only part of what I'm saying. I'm also saying that I don't want to see them do that with any of them. I don't want to see this increase in power of the DOJ, where we get the FBI involved in small, petty things that aren't a big deal. Well, you're literally saying one piece is enough to get the FBI involved. I
don't think this is a small, petty thing. And that's because when something's on the news, I just want for us to come to agreement on this. If something is being played on the nightly news over and over and over again, that's when the federal government will usually get involved.
Black Lives Matter.
Why? What is with this harping on Black Lives Matter?
Was it on the news over and over?
It's not the same situation, but I don't even want to argue that. If you told me, hey, that there were owners of parrots that were calling up pet shops and threatening them across the nation and saying that we will kill you if you keep feeding parrots this, I'd say the FBI should coordinate with local law enforcement and make sure that stops. I mean, this is the flavor of the moment.
It's ridiculous. We can see there are other stories.
No, your grievance is with the Trump administration. I don't know how you see this. Your grievance is with what happened under the Trump administration. And you know what? Thank God we have competent leadership now under the Biden administration who is going after groups that are doing threats. So I don't know what to tell you, man.
Selectively,
that's your guy.
Only selectively. They don't go after the groups that
there's
actually
no
do
riots.
the real violence.
There's no riots, BLM riots out there or anything.
There are.
What are you talking
Look under
about?
the Biden administration. The first month of the Biden administration, there were riots almost nightly in Portland and Seattle. They actually deployed the feds to a courthouse in Seattle. Isn't that weird? But I don't recall Merrick Garland or the Biden administration's attorney general saying that they were. Look, look. Everybody knows what's going on. Like, listen, I'm engaged. I actually enjoy you as the person, but everybody knows this is bullshit, and you know deep down that this is bullshit. You know it. I know you know it. I know you know that Merrick Garland doing this and just going after it because what was on TV? It was on TV a lot. It's a bullshit reason. Everybody understands it. You can't. First off, you've made the undefensible position that even in one case, the FBI should get involved. Even if it's one case. That would literally mean every single type of case that we see that you could loosely connect anyone together. Packers fans, a Packers fan, after the game, he resisted arrest and threatened the police. Well, now the FBI has to send a memorandum out saying we're going to work with local law enforcement there in Green Bay to make sure that Packers fans aren't issuing threats and shit. It's nonsense and you know it. You might say, I don't know if it's political or not, but you don't have a defense that there are groups that have engaged in more violence, that have been on TV more, and that their FBI hasn't issued these sorts of memorandums. And the truth of the matter is, you wouldn't have liked it. If the Trump administration came out and said, there's a lot going on with the Black Lives Matter, there's a lot going on with people that are protesting the kids in cages. We've heard threats from people that are protesting kids in cages. So now we're going to have the FBI work with local law enforcement groups to look into these groups that are upset about kids in cages. You would have went nuts. And if not you, if you're the one person that wouldn't have, you understand that 95% of the Democrats would have. They would have said this is an abuse of power. You are weaponizing the FBI to go after political opponents.
I don't disagree that people would have said that, and I think that they probably would feel justified in doing so based off a lack of trust with the Trump administration. I don't know where this lack of trust comes from with the Biden administration that is nascent. I don't know why you're so instantly thinking that they're just out there to settle scores and to take on people that don't agree with them. I mean, where does this come from?
Okay, real quick. So then, because that's a 95% answer. So you're saying, had Bill Barr in the Trump administration, when there were mass protests and threats and things like that from people upset about kids in cages, had Bill Barr released a memo saying the FBI is going to be working in conjunction with law enforcement to look into these people that are upset about kids in cages, you would have been fine with that. I'm just a direct answer.
I would have been fine with that. I don't know. I mean, I have to see how it was worded and such. You know what I mean?
Same exact wording, the way Merrick Garland did it. You'd have been fine?
If it was worded like Merrick Garland that we want to work with local and state police, I don't see why I would have a problem with that. I don't want to see people get death threats or violence. I don't care who it is.
I don't believe you, but I can't prove it, so I'll continue to debate.
Why do you not believe me?
Because I just don't. I just don't. I think that you would have been like, this is outrageous. Donald Trump is targeting his political opponents. He's using the FBI to investigate his political opponents. I think that's what you would have said.
I never lost trust in the FBI, Rob. Throughout the 4 years of the Trump administration, I never lost trust in the Department of Justice. I never lost trust in the FBI. I know there's 115,000 people in the Department of Justice. And even if leadership, someone like Bill Barr, I think is corrupt, and I'm not even saying he was, but even if I think he was, I know he doesn't represent the entire agency. So why would I come to that conclusion?
I don't believe you. I'm just telling you right now. I just don't.
Well, I mean,
I will go through the debate.
I'm a 42-year-old man. Why would I lie to you in front of all these people?
Because it is so outside the realm. Like, for example, there were times that Trump. Do you think Trump ever weaponized his DOJ? You said earlier, oh, Trump's DOJ. The DOJ is supposed to be separate, but it wasn't under Trump. You said that earlier, right?
I said there was abuse under the Trump administration.
Name it.
What
Name
I
the
thought
abuse
was
of the DOJ. Name the abuse you're talking about under the DOJ.
I don't know. Let me try to think of an incident where Bill Barr. Okay, Bill Barr coming out a month before the Mueller report was released and hijacking the narrative. I thought that was an abuse of power because
Why? How do you?
because it tainted the public opinion of the report.
And so
And so the
he
Department
didn't.
of
He didn't
Justice.
send the FBI after him. So what? He just came. Why would you assume that Bill Barr's motivations were impure?
I'm not. I'm saying he should have stayed out of it and just let the report be released. That's all I'm saying. He didn't have to do the press conference a month before
That's a
the
mistake,
report was
not an.
released.
That's a mistake, not an
Well,
abuse of power.
okay. Well, neither of us have proof that it was an accident or a mistake, so I'm
So
going
it's
to
not an
assume
abuse.
that you asked me for an example, and in my opinion, that was an abuse. That was the Department of Justice being too close to the Trump administration because he also exonerated Trump. Also, what about this memo, the 19-page memo he wrote before he became Attorney General, trying to prove that Trump was, innocent or whatever?
Well, what? But again, why are you? What you're saying? You're making an accusation. You're saying corruption. That's what you're saying, right? Which means you have to know what his motivation was.
I'm not saying
I'm just
corruption.
saying it's true.
Corruption is a blanket term that just discounts everything. Look, Bill Barr did a great job with the election. He came out and said there wasn't widespread voter fraud, and I agree with him. So why would I say that if I think he's a corrupt official and the DOJ is totally screwed? Why in the world would I applaud that and say good job? Because it's for my side. See,
right,
you're so partisan. You can't see beyond for 1 second that somebody can float above partisanship. You know what I mean?
Okay, real quick. What this is, I'm supposed to believe that you were upset that Bill Barr correctly summarized the Mueller report 2 weeks before it came out, and you thought that was corruption. Everything he said was correct, right? No, you could say, but there were more details. But you were upset about that. You thought that was corruption. But if Bill Barr would have came out and said, we're going to have the FBI look into people that are protesting Trump, you would have said, well, that's fair. That's fair. That's nonsense. You would have said
Bill Barr would have come out.
Bill Barr wrote a 19-page. Go ahead.
If Bill Barr would have come out and said there are credible threats and there are instances of violence, even one instance of violence, that we are going to ask the Department of Justice to work with local and state officials to make sure they've got all the resources they need, I wouldn't have been upset about that. Maybe emotionally, I would have been like, well, I wonder what's going on here. But I'm trying to be honest. I have no reason to lie to you here. So the fact that you think I'm lying is insulting to me, Rob.
I'm not going to
because I'm not going to call you a liar. I'm taking you at face value. But calling me a liar is insulting.
The fact that you're saying that Bill Barr is corrupt for literally correctly summarizing a report 2 weeks before it came out, but saying that had Bill Barr instead. You said the DOJ under Trump was corrupt. I asked you for an example.
I did not say that. I did not. I said there were abuses. I did not say they were corrupt. I said there were abuses under the Trump administration.
Then I'll use the same language with Merrick Garland. This is an abuse going after these parents. Fair enough. Right? The fact that you would say that's an abuse, correctly summarizing a report 2 weeks before it came out, that's an abuse. But it wouldn't have been an abuse if he put out a memorandum saying, oh, we're going to have the FBI look into people that are upset about Donald Trump because there have been threats against Trump and there have been threats against Trump's children and there have been threats against... I'm sorry. I'm not going to focus on it anymore. I don't want the whole debate to be whether or not I trust you. I'll just say this. Even if you're the unusual Democrat that somehow holds those two positions, it was abuse to summarize a report, but not abuse to have the FBI look into the entire apparatus that was against Trump. Okay, that makes you 1 in a million. 99.9% of other left-wing people and Democrats would have said it would be an abuse for Bill Barr to do that. And so I think you could see if you're in such a minority that you would be literally 1 in a million, that maybe the other side would be also correct to say this looks like an abuse when you see all these other organizations that there could be memorandums talking about the FBI working in conjunction to look into, and yet we're only going after one that happens to politically benefit the Democrats.
All I'm saying is that this has a bright spotlight on it right now, thanks to right-wing media, and there have been incidents of violence and harassment, and so that's why the government's moving. You're claiming that they're doing it for political reasons, and I can't convince you otherwise, and I'm not going to. You have your reasons for that. I'm just telling you my thinking behind it is there's a big spotlight, and people want this to stop, and so the DOJ is going to do everything it can to help with that. That's it.
Name them. Just give me 2 examples of what you're talking about, of attacks and violence and harassment. Go ahead. Give me some examples.
I don't know. I could just Google right now. I mean, you can see if you Google death threats or whatever, you see for yourself.
That's it. We're just Googling. That's it, right? That's what Merrick Garland did. Well, the
I don't
problem
know.
is
I'm not
this
privy
isn't
to
a
how the
substantial
Department
threat.
of Justice makes their decisions, Rob, and
So
neither are you.
here's what we know. He had a chance to say what his reason was for doing this. He said the NSBA letter and he said news reports. When asked about the cases outlined in the NSB letter, which I've read and you haven't, almost every one of those cases isn't harassment. It's exactly the things Merrick Garland's saying is allowed, but the NSBA said it wasn't. It was just parents saying, I'm pissed off about this, and I don't think you should be controlling my kid like this. And they said, fine, we're shutting down the meeting early. That's what the majority of the things outlined in the NSBA letter says, which Bill Barr cited as, or I'm sorry, which Merrick Garland cited as a reason to do this. And then he didn't give any specific cases. He just said news reports. Are you okay with the DOJ like making decisions based on what? How do we know what news it was? Are you okay if the news reports were Rachel Maddow?
It doesn't matter. It's that our Attorney General and Department of Justice made a decision. This was credible, and they were concerned enough that they did it. I mean, we heard reports of people doing Nazi salutes at school board meetings.
What was that? Yeah, did you read that? I read it. You know what it was?
Yeah, he was saying that the school board was acting like Nazis, and so he saluted them.
Right now,
okay.
Given that,
but don't you think the FBI, don't you think federal authorities should maybe look into that? Don't you think the local police might be a little overwhelmed by a guy who's so candidly doing a Nazi salute as a joke? Maybe that guy's connected to some groups or something, right? I mean, don't you want to check that out?
Interesting you say
I
that.
would want them to look into that.
Please, let me finish. Didn't we just have a bunch of Democratic operatives dress up like Nazis to smear Glenn Youngkin?
You talking about people who wore khakis and had tiki torches?
What were they doing? Yeah, what were they doing? What were they?
They were standing in front of his bus.
What were they doing? Don't be disingenuous. You know what they were doing.
I'm saying they were representing people that marched at Charlottesville, but they weren't actually they weren't saying the Jews will replace us or something like that. This guy literally did a Nazi salute.
Dude, come on. Don't do it now. Don't be disingenuous. You know exactly what they were doing.
I'm not being disingenuous. They showed up as pretending to be those people. They didn't use the actual language they used.
So what? They used their outfit?
Rob, you asked him a question. You got to let him answer, man.
Well, I mean, I just say, like, I see where you're going, Rob, but I think there's a big difference between dressing up like a soy boy who marched at Charlottesville and actually doing a Nazi salute and saying whatever, hail, whatever, Heil, whatever, you know?
I mean, it's a joke. Everybody knows, even the operatives that later talked about it. I forget the name of the woman, but she's like the Project Veritas as a left. Even she admitted, oh, well, it was all intended to be a joke. It was all mocking. We were dressing up as Nazis to mock Glenn Youngkin, saying these are the type of people that would go for you. Everybody knows that's what they were doing. Okay, so it was a joke. That's their defense. It was a joke that they were being satirical, that they were acting as Nazis supporting the other side. There is no distinction why that, with 5 people, wouldn't be investigated by the FBI if we're going to investigate one guy saying you're acting like Nazis and then making a Nazi salute. There is no distinction.
See, the difference here is you're talking about one incident versus a series of incidents happening across the nation.
Show me another Nazi salute being issued.
You know, I'm saying all the harassment, the death threats, the phone calls, the bringing a gun, whatever, I don't know.
You keep deflecting, right? Because you keep saying, well, there's all of these things. You can't give me the incidents. But then you say, but this one incident was enough that you just said, this guy giving a Nazi salute. Don't you think?
I gave it as an example.
Please let me finish.
Brought it as an example.
Said, did you not say this? Did you not say, you don't think the FBI should get involved with this guy doing the salute? That's what you said, right?
Yes.
Okay, don't you think the FBI should get involved in the McAuliffe campaign and the Lincoln Project for pretending to be Nazis to smear an opponent?
I don't know about the McAuliffe campaign. They didn't even know about it. But if the FBI wants to investigate the Lincoln, if the FBI wants to investigate the Lincoln Project for impersonating Charlottesville marchers, then go ahead. I don't have a problem with that.
Now,
why would I?
Okay, real quick. It wasn't just the Lincoln Project. Let's be clear, because one of the people was the chair of the Young Democrats, or I'm sorry, the treasurer of the Young Democrats, I believe, in Virginia. So they should investigate the Young Democrats as well, correct?
If the FBI thinks there's a connection there and this person did something coordinated with them, sure, I don't care. Why would I care about any of that?
Why didn't
I don't know. Why? How do you know they didn't?
Why didn't they issue a public memorandum?
How do you know they didn't? How do you know they didn't?
I know they didn't issue a public memorandum.
So maybe a public memorandum is a tool that's used in certain cases or in certain instances when they know it's more effective. How do you know they didn't do something privately?
They didn't.
Oh, that's so you work at the Department of Justice? You know this, Rob? I didn't realize. You get a W-2? You get a W-2 from the Department of Justice?
How do you know that there weren't investigators that investigated Trump's Ukraine call that weren't released to you and definitively exonerated him? How do you know?
I don't. Just like
Okay,
you don't
so
know.
then no need to impeach. For all we know, there was an investigation, so no need to impeach.
Impeach is a tool of Congress for high crimes and misdemeanors. That's up to them to decide, not you and I.
I gotta say, you really, it's unfortunate. I didn't think you were doing so bad, but I think you really discredit yourself when you're going to say that one person that issued a mocking Nazi salute warrants the FBI investigation, but it was
I'm not
different
saying
when it was
that.
the
You're
people smearing Glenn
disingenuous.
Youngkin. We go
You're
back to the tape. You
disingenuous
said
for-
it.
You're disingenuous for implying that I'm saying that. I'm saying there's a series of events here, as well as Merrick Garland referencing that as well. This is one instance. All you've got is your one instance. You keep referencing this thing, this thing. You're not developing a pattern. Merrick Garland said there's a pattern here. The nation's eyes are on this. I'm going to deal with it.
Show me the pattern. Show me the incidents.
Just Google yourself. Death threat school board. Bunch of things come up. I
There's
did
death
before the
threats to
stream.
people all the time, to organizations
Okay,
all the time.
but it's not on. It's not on Fox News every night, and it doesn't have the American people concerned. People
So
want to
you're
go to
telling
school
me-
board
you're
meetings
telling me that
without
death
fist
threats-
fights.
You're telling me death threats were on Fox News every night. They were airing death threats to school board members. That's what you're telling me.
You see these raucous crowds at the school boards every night. That's what you see. People screaming and acting a fool, and this guy getting tackled to the ground because he's morally justified, according to you, to fight with the police.
You see raucous crowds for all sorts of things all the time,
Not on Fox
including
News
during
every
the Biden
night.
administration. What? So wait a minute. So the FBI, the Department of Justice, is literally deciding to send the FBI places based on what Fox News. If MSNBC does it, or NBC, or ABC, or NBC, or CBS, no problem. But it's what Fox News is doing. Why is it that Fox News?
It has nothing to do with Fox. I just bring it as an example. It's on CNN, MSNBC, all of them every night too.
Okay, cool. So there are instances of raucous crowds in other venues, right? Every night on those organizations as well. So why? So you'd be? I mean, this is just.
Can I?
it's
I just wanted to. Sorry, I just needed to take a second because I can't mute the notification. Somebody just gifted like 10 subs, so I just wanted to shout out and say thank you, Zonia,
Nice.
for the 10 gifted
awesome.
subs.
Maybe-
Really appreciate that. The notifications are going to keep going off, so it's going to interrupt you guys. So I just figured I would go ahead and shout it out and say thank you.
I don't know how much you want to keep going on this, Rob, or you want to get to questions. I'm happy to admit defeat to you in this. You've owned me. I mean, I don't know what to say. Like the fact that you're at the point where you're calling me disingenuous and saying that I'm lying, like it's got me pretty frustrated, to be honest, because I was don't throw those charges at you at all, and I think that's pretty rude to say that kind of stuff.
Listen,
I was going to interrupt at some point because I think at that point you're just going at you're going to agree to disagree. Obviously, he's going to defend himself and say that he is being best faith, his good faith argument, and you're saying that he's not. So I was going to suggest that we direct it towards the latter part of it. You can finish up what you want to say on this topic, each of you. Take a couple minutes, and then maybe get into what you think this means for the Republican Party. We'll take a little while open on that. And then we do have some questions saved up. People have been messaging questions. And if anybody wants more questions, BGalb is actually a moderator also in Rob's chat. So at BGalb for Rob's chat, or you can come over here and at me or BGalb. BGalb and Queen Alexa are looking for questions to take in. We do have a nice little list formed already. So, and then thank you, of course, everybody for showing up and following, and then thanks again, Zonia, for the gifted sub. So yeah, if you guys each want to take another couple minutes and just kind of wrap this part of it up, and then maybe move on to we can move on for just a few minutes onto like what it means for the future, like as far as the midterms coming up.
Okay, so I'll say this just real quick about the disingenuous thing. Like when even you admit that 99.9% of every other Democrats would be like, yeah, the total opposite of what you're saying. Like you could see how people would say, to think that I'm debating someone who's 1 in 10,000 or 1 in a million seems to be strange. But I'll leave room that I could be wrong for this. I'm just saying it seems, particularly because you're willing to say for more innocuous things like summarizing the Mueller report 2 weeks before it came out, that was abuse. It just seems to me like it seems beyond the pale that you wouldn't think it would be abuse for the FBI to start looking into all of these organizations that were anti-Trump. That's all I'm saying. And in the second part, you did say we could go back. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll eat crow on this, but it seemed to me that you said that with this Nazi salute, don't you want the FBI getting involved in it? That's what I heard you say. And if you said that, and then it seemed like You're trying to back off when it comes to the 5 people dressing up like neo-Nazis or all-right people when it comes to Youngkin. That's what I'm saying. It just seems slimy. On this topic real quick, I'll finish up in 30 seconds. I think you could see that this is unprecedented, as IRI admitted. It's being done with a double standard. There are groups that have engaged in more violence, more threats, and things like that the FBI is not going after. And neither IRI or Merrick Garland, more importantly, could cite one example of how this is a systemic problem or something that requires the FBI getting involved. We would imagine local law enforcement would be more than capable to handle these problems unless it was so pervasive it was out of their hands. The news reports that we're talking about are nebulous, and it's just Google. There have been some threats. Yet every time people talk about the specific things, it turns out that they're not things that the FBI should get involved for, or even local law enforcement, with the exception of 1 or 2 instances. So yeah, it was clearly abuse. It is and I'm telling you, IRI and Democrats aren't going to like where this goes, as we'll talk about in the next section here, because this is going to set a pattern for using the FBI to investigate political opponents of the party that's in charge that none of us are going to like the outcome of where this leads.
All right, IRI.
All right, well, just to wrap this up, I was just saying about the Nazi thing that I think that would be a little beyond local officials, the local sheriff and his 2 deputies, to figure out what's going on there. And we'd probably want to get somebody a little higher up there. That's why I was implying that probably want to get the FBI or some federal law enforcement involved, just to make sure everything's on the up and up there in that situation. As far as this, Rob has this standard that he's created for the FBI or the Department of Justice enacting an investigation, especially a high-profile one. It's his own standard. He's not privy to what goes on within the Department of Justice to make these decisions, what they investigate, what they don't. He's not aware of what investigations even happen. He's just aware of the public ones. But the fact that Merrick Garland did not cite a couple of specific cases is not reason enough to say that he's got no right or he's got no justification for doing this, because even if he rattled off 3 cases, it would never be good enough for you. The goalposts are on wheels and they keep moving out to the parking lot. So let's just be honest. I trust the Department of Justice to know when an investigation should be opened and when to not investigate, period.
All right. That was awesome, very spirited, and obviously both of you being very respectful, and thank you for making my job easy. So what I would maybe like to direct it more towards the second half of what the topic was, which was basically what this means for the midterms that are coming up, how we think this is going to influence things, and just generally the attitude of the upcoming elections and the upcoming or the current political environment, especially after things like the election in Virginia, etc. So I think Rob started that last one and you finished. So
I started.
I started. So Rob.
Oh, you started. Okay, yeah. So I'll let Rob open this one then.
Don't matter to me. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how long we'll be going on this. We've already gone 1:40, but I'll just summarize quick.
So I'm expecting like maybe 20 to 30 minutes on this, but like I said,
Okay.
If you guys want to go longer, that's fine. There are some questions that we have lined up. We have maybe 50, at least like I want to say like 10, 15 questions right now, and there's more coming in. So
oh my god.
So it's up to you guys. Like
minutes on this.
How? Yeah, if we want to make it shorter,
that's fine.
Yeah. So would you guys just want to make a
minutes.
quick section on this and just leave it at that,
Sure.
and then go straight to questions, or do you want to do a little bit of open?
Do you want to just do a statement each on this, Rob, and then move to the questions?
Okay,
I
let's
don't
do
think
that.
Anything too controversial?
Let's say like 5. We'll give
Yeah.
about like 5 minutes to each of you guys, and you can just make your statement on this, and then we'll just move right to the questions then.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll be quicker than 5 minutes, and then we'll see if we have some back and forth. So I think that the actual position of Merrick Garland getting involved, I think that that's just kind of a multiplier, right? The real thing that's going to drive 2022 is parents, right? Because these are demographics that traditionally aren't reached by Republicans. Traditionally, we think education was a win for Democrats in these elections. And so these are votes that will matter because, one, you're driving up the base for parents that are upset. And second, you're going to be able to reach across the aisle to people that have said, I've been Democrat my whole life, but I find this issue of potential indoctrination of our children, and then multiplied by the FBI looking at me possibly with scrutiny because I have a problem with this and I went to my school board. I think that you will see that this will be an issue further than just Virginia and New Jersey. Now, a couple caveats. We're a long way away from the election in 2022. The Democrats could theoretically try to deal with this situation in a different way. They could. This is something they could say, which I would actually be for, because I'm more concerned with getting this racism and indoctrination out of schools and the mask mandates out of schools and the lockdowns out of schools. The Democrats could go this direction. Okay, we're done with the mask mandates. We're done with the lockdowns, so that'll take care of that. And as far as CRT, we don't know if this is CRT or whatever you want to call it. But yes, parents are right to point out some horrific situations that have occurred, and we agree that they are upset with this. But we don't think that this is in curriculums everywhere. So we're going to do our best. If you're a parent and you see your kid being taught things that are bad, contact your local Democratic representative. We're going to be working as Democrats to make sure this doesn't happen. That's how Democrats could approach it. Now, you see, there is a wing of the Democrat Party that wants to go the other way, right? And they want to say, the election of Youngkin proves white supremacy. If they do that, this issue will be the primary issue in 2022. You should, and I talked to IRI about this, so I'm sure he'll agree with me. You should never insult voters, even if you hate them, even if you do think that you're racist. You shouldn't tell them that, because you want them to vote for you. So, I think that the Democratic Party, if they're smart, they need to kind of regain the narrative over this situation and say, stop insulting parents. Say you have a right to be upset. You can even say you're right to be upset. There's misinformation out there, but we totally get why you're upset. But if that doesn't happen, if it continues to be as McAuliffe did, it's going to hurt the Democrats a lot in 2022.
All right. Thank you, Rob. IRI, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I agree a lot with what Rob said, and I do have faith in the Democratic Party identifying this as an issue that hurt them in Virginia. They still managed to get New Jersey, and it looks like it's going to be about 3% that they get it. First time since 1977 that a Democrat won re-election. So I don't think Tuesday was as bad as people are portraying it. And Rob touched on some of the grievances these parents have, and this is more than the CRT issue. This is the mask mandates. This is the vaccine mandates. And I think by this time next year, that's not going to be something that's happening in schools that is discussed about, at least this passionately. I think a lot more people will be back to work. A lot of parents, a lot of these people are just looking for some fun and looking for some action. They're bored at home, and the school board is something you can go to and yell at people. So I don't see this being as much of an issue. But yeah, I mean, Terry McAuliffe screwed up, and he said parents shouldn't be involved in their child's education. It hurt them. And so Democrats are going to take on a parental rights approach and say, no, parents should be involved and we can have discussions. And voters just want to know that their elected officials are listening and taking their concerns seriously. Solutions are kind of secondary, to be honest. I think people just kind of want to know their grievances are being heard. And the Democrats learned a lesson with defund the police last year, and they're not going to let a narrative just go get running like that. I think it's going to come down to the economy. I think our economy is going to be booming. I know that might get some eyes rolling out there, but stock market has continued to set records. Unemployment is years ahead of the previous two downturns, where we're at 4.6%. We've got some supply chain problems, but that's a worldwide problem. And I don't see like gas prices staying this high. We've got 10 oil refineries that are offline right now due to the pandemic. And so there's a decrease in the gasoline available to us. So I think we're going to turn all these problems around, and I'm hoping we can hold on to the House and the Senate. I know it's going to be a battle, but it's going to be a lot of fun to pay attention, and I hope Rob and I get a chance to talk more and more about it as we get closer to it.
I'll just say real quick in response, if you don't mind. I don't think that it's going to be as simple as you say that parents will be less bored. I think that the pandemic, because kids were being taught on Zoom, parents for the first time saw what education looks like in these public schools, and they're going to remember that. Right. And just because even if the lockdowns lift and stuff more, they're still going to remember it. So I think that issue is going to persist. I will say this. You're not going to agree with this. I think even with defund the police, it's not that, the Democrats realize they're wrong. It's the Democrats realize not to say the truth publicly. That's the truth. What Terry McAuliffe said was the truth. That's what they feel. They feel that the government is your kids' parents. They don't want you involved in their education. And now that they've been caught with their hand in the cookie jar, they're going to try to be like, no, we didn't mean that. But they meant it. That's what I truly believe. And lastly, with the economy, I think you're wrong. Like, you could see, like, the producer price index is 8.1% year to year. That's one of the high. I think that's a record since they've been keeping it. What does that mean? Well, if producers' prices are rising that much and consumer prices aren't that high yet, we got a long way to go for inflation for consumers, and it's going to be bad. And I hate to say I told you so, but when people were calling for lockdowns and stuff, I predicted this is exactly what would happen, and here we are. But I will say this, to throw a bone to IRI, I truly mean this. I hope I'm wrong. I would rather our country do good than be proven right. So if Joe Biden turns the economy around and it starts kicking ass, that's great. That's more important than my side winning some election. So I hope you're right. I really do. I just don't see it. I think that we got a lot of pain yet to come. And I think, unfortunately for the Democrats, but fortunately, because for the country, that people are going to correctly blame the Democrats for this economic woes that we're going to see going into 2022.
Can I do a brief response, Nacho?
Yeah, you guys still. I was gonna just cut in and tell you that you guys still have about 5 minutes. You guys both did your like little statements in about 5 minutes. So if you want to go on for about 5 minutes, that's fine.
Oh, well, I appreciate you saying that, Rob, and I do think that we should put our country and the suffering of our people shouldn't come for political gain. So I do appreciate you saying that, and I just, I hope things turn around. I mean, just today I read an article in the Los Angeles Times about the ports starting to clear out some of these empty containers because of a fine system they came up with, and there's like 16% less containers or something like that. They're moving faster now in Long Beach and Los Angeles. So the Biden administration is talking with FedEx and the rail companies, and we were really bogged down with the infrastructure bill, fighting and legislating that. And I actually think there's some stuff in there. For example, the bipartisan infrastructure bill has a part in it where in Savannah, Georgia, they can create a pop-up port for containers to store them about 100 miles inland. So I think we're going to see some serious action to rectify this supply chain problem that is ultimately leading to the inflation. I mean, I don't see how any of Joe Biden's policies have led to this inflation. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, it's not, let me be clear. Most of what we're seeing isn't because of COVID. It's because of our response to COVID. The lockdown, when you lock down the economy for months after months after months in varying degrees in different places, but predictably what happens is you're not going to see the pain immediately. You're going to see it down the road. So what happens is you have by default then stopped people producing things that would be need for a supply chain later. So that's step one, what's happening. We've seen one of the largest transfers of wealth by having the lockdowns and then having $1 trillion worth of stimulus. Now, let me be clear, though. That's not just Joe Biden. Trump endorsed the lockdowns initially. He's to blame as well. And the Republicans signed those damn bills. Now, Biden's taking it even further, and it's going to cause more inflation. And the thing Biden did that was unique, we went from the world's largest net exporter of fossil fuels to now, in the name of fighting climate change, we are begging OPEC to please send us more oil. I mean, these sort of things are going to have long-lasting effects, and it doesn't matter to a lot of people that have high and mighty ideals about fighting things like climate change, that people in my neck of the woods, that in rural Pennsylvania where people live paycheck to paycheck and have to drive 20, 30 minutes to work, they can't afford it anymore. They can't. It's getting horrible. I just bought groceries today. $370 it cost me. It was the same groceries that would have cost me probably about $290. So I mean, it's getting really bad. And Biden's policy, not just Biden, but even establishment Republicans and Democrats that went with these lockdown/stimulus, and then the idea of intentionally sabotaging our energy production. These are the predictable results, sadly.
Do you have kids, Rob?
10 months old.
Are you receiving the child tax credit?
Not yet. So we have elected, because he's only 10 months old, we will get it at the end, right, of when we file our taxes here in, you could get it month to month, or you could get it
lump
at the
sum.
end. So we will be getting it the lump sum at the end. Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope that helps defer some of the costs of the higher groceries. I don't argue that prices are higher, but I believe that things like the advanced child tax credit, the 3 stimulus payments, and the enhanced unemployment insurance has actually left people in a pretty good position. I know not everybody, but JP Morgan Chase had a report that came out just recently that said people have the median checking account balance is 50% higher than July of 2019. People have paid off billions, I think $80 billion worth of credit card debt. And so a lot of people are in pretty good shape. We have more job openings than people willing to take them, because people are doing pretty good out there. So I think our economy is humming along. We just got we have too much demand for goods and not enough way to move them right now. But one thing I want to touch on was the Biden pipeline shutdown affecting the price of gas. I think you said it, like we went from exporting and all this, and then Biden shut it down. Are you talking about the Keystone XL that is a mile built into Montana?
No, not just that, right? Biden has
Like, what else did he
intentionally,
do?
like, we shut down, we encouraged, like, for example, Russia's pipeline for people to go from there. We have lowered the production of our own fossil fuels in the United States. It's not a complete shutdown of those production, but it's intentionally lowering that production. Why else do you think that we're begging OPEC to produce more and send us more?
Well,
How did we go from the
OPEC,
world's largest exporter to now begging a country to send us?
we've
Our,
always
our
imported
demand,
millions.
yeah,
We've
but
always
demand didn't
imported millions
increase
of
that
barrels.
much.
Well,
Right, right.
what happened
We
was the supply hit the floor when we shut down, and so OPEC took some time to slow down the supply, but also our refineries shut down because of the pandemic. Like I said, we have 10 refineries out of like 130 that are non-operational right now, and we also have a lack of truckers to transport that gas once it's been whatever,
But
once
why?
they've
Because
refined it.
not because
But
of
that's been a
COVID,
problem
because of
for
the reaction.
decades.
But
No,
it's
no,
not
no.
because of
That's the
COVID, it's the
trucking.
reaction to COVID.
Okay,
The
I want to
trucking
clarify something here just for a second because this was actually something that I was going to pose this question and ask this just generally how you guys felt about this. I have looked into the trucker situation. If there's actually a natural like lull or decline that happens in like trucker season, I guess, where they lay off workers. And so it is a combination of what naturally happens versus also the shutdowns ending up and also by the way we're pretty much out, so I guess this will be like the first question and it's going to be to both of you guys. So since that's the case, like it is kind of a combination of the two, and that is also the reason why we don't have as many. That's part of the reason why the cargo ships are parked where they're at too. So people have condemned Democrats and also saying like, well, in places like California there are more restrictions on how you get your license and what it takes to become a truck driver, etc. So there's like all these combination of things, and it's like, can you really pin it down to one party, or is this just pretty unfortunate just the way things played out in that it was like a slow season for truckers, and then we shut down, which meant more people were furloughed and less people were demanding goods, et cetera, et cetera. And then now we're in a place where it's a lot harder to get your license and get back on the road. It's not like you can just turn out a truck driver every 2 weeks. You have to go through a program. So I don't know if you.
But it is a
thoughts on those.
combination. No doubt it's a combination. And I'll even go further than this. Both parties are to blame. Let's not kid ourselves. I already articulated why I thought the shutdown / stimulus is responsible for so much economic woes and one of the largest transfers of wealth from the poor and working class to the upper class. And the Republicans signed those bills as well. They deserve criticism. But that's the entire point. We continue to see the Biden administration, even on that angle, continue to push for more lockdown-oriented policies, more vax mandates and things like that. That is further hampering how many people are engaged in those types of jobs. In addition to that, we see a long-term effect where we are not encouraging people to get into that sort of blue-collar work. So we see a natural decline in the amount of truckers and stuff anyways. And then when you factor in that along with COVID, we've seen incentives for people to not work. For example, my father-in-law is a truck driver who drives oversized loads. So one of the big businesses in my little town where I live is building basically double wides, trailers that you set on site. So my father-in-law's job is he drives the truck that gets those to the site. You have to have flag cars, right, in the front and the back of the truck, depending on how big it is. If it's so big, you need two, et cetera, et cetera. Like, people get the idea. The problem is people were making more on unemployment with the additional benefits in Pennsylvania because of the COVID unemployment benefits, that the flag car people just like, cool, I'm not working. I make more staying at home, which forced then drivers to be like, well, now we have to pay more out of our pocket, which meant drivers were like, you know what, then I was due for a vacation anyways, I'm going to take it. Now they have, if my father-in-law wants, he could run 24/7 if he wanted, as long as he's within the laws, which is another problem, the regulations on how the drivers can drive. So it is a combination of stuff, but certainly Joe Biden's administration is encouraging the exact wrong things that will help solve this problem, in my opinion.
Okay, IRA, your thoughts?
I mean, if the question is, what's led to the shortage of truckers? Or truck drivers?
Yeah, I guess a little bit of that. It's so I was just pointing out that there's a combination of things that are happening. Even some of the things that Rob was saying maybe remind me of, you know, the timing of things, I guess. I'm on it. I'll be honest, I'm a little more center right leaning, so I have my questions or skepticisms. Like, I don't want to add another question, but maybe something. For an example, like, I'm not necessarily against the shutdown of the pipelines, maybe for the reasons that they did, more so for that it's really awful timing because we need more jobs in the economy, etc. So things like that maybe aren't helping. Is it a combination of things? Can we really blame one party? Is sort of like where I was directing that.
I gotcha. Well, I'm only familiar with the Keystone XL permit being revoked on day one of Joe Biden's administration. They only built about a mile of that into Montana. That thing was years away from being completed. And a lot of that oil is already coming over rail and trucks since that project's been going on since, I believe, 2005. So I don't think that pipeline was going to somehow lead to us not having a problem here in November 2021. But I do think the truckers contribute to this. And it's interesting to hear Rob, his father is in the industry, so he probably knows more than me. But my understanding is that trucking is hard, and you're away from your family a lot. And the average age, I think, of truckers is like 47 or something. And I saw some stats recently that showed that only 7% of truckers are women, something like 77% are white. Now, I'm not trying to get identity politics here, but it's not exactly a career that seems that's reaching out to a lot of people. So there's great opportunity. I've read that truckers can make $100,000 a year right now with signing bonuses and such, but a lot of people are rethinking their lives due to the pandemic. They sat home for 18 months. They did get the unemployment that Rob mentioned and the stimulus payments, so they're not as desperate to go right back to work. And they're saying, you know what, maybe I want to be around for my kid growing up and not come home every 3 weeks. And I do agree on the regulations. Joe Biden actually has made some decisions to help truckers. For example, I think you have to be 21 years old to drive on federal highways as a trucker. They're talking about lowering that to 18 now to get more people out there. They did allow truckers to go 24/7, I believe, at least at the ports to do their pickups and such. So I actually would argue that I think the Biden administration is taking some steps to help increase the number of truckers, but it's kind of a dying industry. It was dying before the Biden administration. It was dying before the Trump administration, and I'm not so sure we have a solution for that. But AI is not coming quick enough.
Well, and I just real quick, I will say this has nothing to do with this discussion per se, but I actually think you're wrong. The numbers that I'm familiar with say that whites are only 62%, about 62.5% of truck drivers. And I can say this: if you're concerned about identity politics, I'm not saying you are, but actually, particularly black people, but people of color are vastly, at least in my area, increasing and getting involved in the industry because it is a good job, especially if you're young. If you're willing to put a lot of hours on the road, you could make huge amounts of money. And probably the company you're working for is going to give you some sort of per diem. So if you're on the road, you're not paying to eat, they're giving you money to eat, plus all the money you're bringing home is yours. You can make huge amounts of money. And I think that, hey, man, if that means that people that came from areas that usually didn't have opportunities, because they didn't think that they got the same amount of education, get in that field and start kicking ass and owning homes and stuff like that, I'm all for it. So yeah, we should, in general, I think something we could bipartisan agree on is we should encourage people to get into these line of works. They are great lines of work. They help our country significantly, and you have an opportunity to make a lot of money and own your home and things like that. So hopefully we do see more truckers.
So I think what both of these gentlemen are saying is that, look, if you don't have a good high-paying job and you want a career, get yourself out there and go get your trucker's license and become a trucker, okay? You get health care. You can help the economy. You get like anywhere from like 50,000 to like 100,000 a year, okay? Most companies will pay you. Okay, not to plug truck driving, but you know what? Get out there and do something, okay?
It sounds like a fun adventure, honestly.
The kids do that. I don't know if they still do this.
I wanted to find I wanted to find an appropriate place to say this early, but all right. Did you say that you're 42?
I am, yeah.
Okay, because when you said that, the chat exploded, and they were like, Well, he's 42. Like, damn, what's he eating? So, look,
Sunscreen.
you're eating sunscreen and wearing it.
Yeah,
right?
I'm eating sunscreen.
For
Right.
comparison, I'm 16. So
Yeah, there you go. No, yeah, everyone in the chat was like, "Wow, he looks good for 42." So there you go. I mean, I think that pretty much wins you the debate, right?
yeah, I agree.
Looking good for 42.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
Okay, so we're gonna ask
awkward.
get some dumb questions out of the way first. Somebody said, some of these I have names for, some of these I don't. What's it like to constantly live in a dem-centrist, complete fantasy world? And that's for you, IRI.
Well, I honestly, I feel like I focus on positive things. I'm willing to criticize the administration or the Dem Party when I think things are wrong. Like I think when they didn't allow the press into the Border Patrol facilities when they were crowded a few months ago, I thought that was wrong. So I don't just cheerlead for the Democratic Party, but I think that we're doing some positive stuff, and I'm excited about some of the policy initiatives and the people we have in power, and so I think it's a good way to live. I mean, there's a lot of doomerism, and there's a lot of conspiracy theory and just kind of questioning your government and who's in control on the right, and so I want nothing to do with that.
So, and to be fair to you, because I think even Rob has said the same thing. I think you're not an ideologue by any means, right? Like if a Republican were to present like the best solution, that wouldn't bother you, right? Because I think I'm pretty fence city myself. People in my chat get pissed off at me because I'm pretty center right. Like if I'm correct, it's not.
I have yet to see it, Nacho, but I guess if a Republican
hypothetically,
was on the right side of
okay,
issues,
in a fantasy world, and for you and the Republicans say, "Hey, this is the best solution moving forward," and you look at it and you calculate it out, you're going to be like, "Yeah, fuck it, we're going for what works," right?
Yeah, I mean, there's some things I disagree with. Like nothing really comes to mind right now, but
Sure.
Yeah, there's some things I disagree with the Democratic Party on. Sure.
Okay. And then for this wasn't necessarily a question, but you guys were covering it, and I think you might have said something in response, because I think even IRI said this, but somebody said the economy is kicking ass. What the fuck is Rob talking about?
That was probably me. Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
it was in chat
IRI.
too. It was in chat.
I'll just say that. Yeah, I don't think that the economy is kicking ass, but I will say this: I hope it does. As I already said so. But yeah, I think it looks bleak, and look, it's not rocket science. I don't claim to be a genius. When you shut down the economy, there's going to be predictable effects. I shouted it. I talked to my politicians in my state. I shouted it. I shouted it at Trump supporters. Trump was saying, "Oh, you know who's doing it well? Newsom and Cuomo." I was like, "This is what's going to happen." And I'll say this. I'll even go further and be a jerk about this, right? Like, I don't want to hear this shit. When I said, but wait a minute, we have to take considerations of the economy. And people said, "What do you want, grandma to die? Is that what you want? You want grandma to die?" Well, here we are. In my state, grandma did die because Tom Wolf forced COVID patients into nursing homes, and the economy's still shit. So great job. And now the same people that didn't want to have a conversation about the predictable effects of shutting down the economy and how that would cause so much pain down the road, now they're like, well, it's so mean that landlords are trying to collect rent. What's going on? This is the real world. You can't shut down the economy and then expect to snap your fingers and everything's going to be okay. So we're going to see the effects of this for a decade, I'm telling you.
Okay.
Can I just add real quick
you can
something?
jump in, yeah.
I just want to say, for 4 years under the Trump administration, we heard that the stock market is the measure of success of the economy from Trump. And he said, look at your 401ks, you're kicking butt. You may not be happy with some of the things I'm saying, but you're happy with them 401ks. And the Dow Jones continues to break records. I mean, the stock market closed over 36,000 for the first time, and there is no appreciation at all for Biden and his administration for that. I just, I think it's a little strange.
Trump was wrong, and the fact that the stock market's doing so well while regular people are hurting more proves it. And I've said this about Trump the entire time. This was one of the pet peeves I had with Trump. When the stock market would go up, he'd say, "See, I'm doing great." When it would go down, he'd say, "Not my fault." Right? You can't do that. If you're going to say the stock market's the measure and the buck stops with you when it's going up, then it goes with you when it's going down. So yeah, Trump was wrong about that.
Okay. IRI, this is for you. Fuji, or I think this is for you. Fuji said, "What are your legitimate arguments for having a competent Biden administration?" And then added a statement at least that said anything but competent. So I don't know.
Well, I would point to the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that Biden just got passed. Trump tried for 4 years. Biden was able to bring 19 Republican senators, including Mitch McConnell, on board, and 13 House Republicans, in the face of their party being very, very upset. And in this toxic political environment, they joined their Democratic colleagues in passing this bill that addresses our nation's concerns. And we've been needing an infrastructure bill for a long time. A lot of Republicans believe that, and Trump could not get it done. And so I'd start with that. I would say that people are could be in a lot worse shape if it wasn't for the American Rescue Plan that the Democrats passed, $1.9 trillion. And let me think, what else? Anything else come to mind real quickly for me? No, I think I'll leave it there.
I'm going to have a debate. I think I'm supposedly debating destiny here in a couple weeks on Biden's record. I'll just say this. There's 3 ways to look at the record. One, there are things like corruption, targeting journalists and things like that. We see we're targeting parents, like this debate we were talking about. We could see that we've gone after journalists such as Bannon, Jack Posobiec, etc. Everything that they said about Trump being a fascist, we could see that those things have been worse under Biden. Second's the economy. I mean, it speaks for itself. Numbers are abysmal. Real people are feeling the pain. I don't have to go into it. Third is foreign policy. Biden's an absolute joke. We have France furious because he's doing things not including them. We had the British that actually censured him because he pulled out of Afghanistan without even being in contact with them. The Afghanistan debacle, we've had him bombing countries like Syria in the name of fighting Iraqis. We've had him drone striking children and things like that. So it has been an abysmal failure in every way. But I will say this in defense of Biden, you can't really blame him. He doesn't know where he's at. So blame the people that are running Biden behind him. So
and I just want to say thanks again to everybody that's following and everybody that's watching. Make sure you go follow the Sprouticus on Twitch. He is the founder of the American Octagon. I am simply the substitute while he is away serving his country. So make sure you go follow the Sprouticus on Twitch, okay? And Twitter. Okay, so our next post here. MPU said, why did IRI post a tweet of Kyle Rittenhouse crying? Does he think it's appropriate to mock people with PTSD?
Well, this is really interesting because I didn't say anything. All I did was post a picture of Kyle Rittenhouse, and all of a sudden people are saying that I'm mocking somebody. I mean, this photo is splashed across all major news sites. And how do you know I'm not saying, look how human this guy is? Look at him. He's a young man who's affected and showing emotion, and that this has impacted his life. I mean, I think it's a little strange to say that I'm mocking him when I just posted a picture. I think that's more a reflection of what MPU thinks and judging someone. And I would ask him to reflect on why he would come to those conclusions about somebody and make assumptions like that.
Just you're here. So what? I'm not going to assume. Why did you post it? Did you post it because you were mocking him or no?
I posted it to just see what the discourse would be. That's it.
So what do you think? Then let me ask this way: like, what do you think about the people that are mocking him and crying?
I think anybody I think anybody mocking him is anytime people are insulting somebody or something like that, I think it's inappropriate.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I didn't see the picture, so I don't know anything about it. So.
Yeah, and yeah, any of these questions are directed more towards one or the other, but both of you are welcome to answer as well. So, Dr. Redpill said, IRI, you never lost trust in the FBI. Would you have lost trust if you were living when they spied on and blackmailed MLK?
Well, I don't know what happened during that time, but I will point again that the FBI is 30,000 plus people, so I think we don't know what they do. This is something in my channel people get mad at me about, that I have this much trust in government, but I just find it a better way to live life instead of looking over my shoulder all the time. I think in order to have justice, you need to have trust in law enforcement. You need the people to trust their law enforcement agencies. And otherwise, nobody's going to cooperate. Nobody's going to be a witness. And our justice system heavily relies on people cooperating with them. And I don't like to sow seeds of doubt in people's minds and fan those flames. It's okay to question. It's okay to hold people accountable for incidents. But the idea that the FBI or any law enforcement agency, even your local police department, is just completely corrupt from one end to the other and you shouldn't trust them, I think that's detrimental to all of us as Americans. I think it makes us less safe. And I don't want to be less safe.
Okay. But there's something to say there. One, we already saw it. You could say there's 32,000 FBI agents or whatever. Yeah, even if the bulk of them are okay, it doesn't matter if the people in positions of leadership are corrupt, right? And that's what we're talking about. And so, again, we talked about this earlier. There could be regular everyday stuff that the FBI is doing okay, but with the big things, the biggest cases, particularly those with political ramifications, if they're engaged in a corrupt or biased way, and this isn't even open for debate. I mean, the IG showed, for example, in the warrant for the wiretap to wiretap the Trump campaign, because it wasn't just Carter Page, because the two Hobbs rule means they could wiretap Carter Page, everyone he talked to, and everyone they talked to, which would get right to Trump in the entirety of his campaign. It had
Thank you for
17
the
errors and
host.
omissions, 220 Woods violations, including directly lying about a CIA letter that said that Carter Page worked with the CIA against Russians, and changing the language of that to say he never did that, which is absolutely corrupt. And the primary subsource, Igor Danchenko, admitting, yeah, this was all bullshit. You shouldn't be doing it. The FBI continued to spy on someone. We see all sorts of incidents, the big things where the FBI is corrupt. Now, I don't disagree with the IRI. Trust in the FBI is important. Just like trust in the CDC is important. Just like trust in the media is important. All that's true. It's not our fault we don't trust them. It's their fault for not earning our trust, because they have constantly showed to be incompetent or corrupt. And so we have a reason to not trust them. And I would counter to IRA that we will never see those things improve if we're not allowed to call out when they're being untrustworthy. If we just say, well, it could be detrimental to not trust them, therefore we have to blindly trust them, that's a huge mistake that leads to some of the biggest corruption that you could imagine. And that's exactly how we get to a very, very, very dark place with authoritarianism, where we could have a police state going after people because we say, well, we have to trust them.
Okay. I shouldn't do that. I'm going to cut the line with my own two, because I have two questions that I thought of listening to both of you guys respond to that. So one for each of you, kind of like being the milquetoast fence sitter on this one. So Rob, first of all, in response to what you said, like, wouldn't you maybe think that it is also the people that are responsible, because the people are electing these officials who are then failing us to some degree, and then well, I'll let you answer that, and then I also have one for IRI as far as trusting the government.
Well, first off, the agencies we're talking about are unelected, and that's the reality. I'll be debating counterpoints on deep state here next Friday, right? That's the reality. We're talking about, when we mention the deep state, it's not a term I use very often, but we're talking about unelected bureaucrats, and that system stays there long after. Joe Biden will come and go, Donald Trump will come and go, but those agencies and those people involved in that sort of thing, they're there to stay, right? And they're unelected. Now, to the effect that we elect the politicians that appoint those people, yeah, I guess you could blame the people, but understand the awesome, mighty propaganda machine that's pushed forth for us that legitimizes this stuff, right? It's hard to expect average Joe Schmo that's concerned about how much money they have in their pocket to buy groceries to understand the nuances of how corrupt the FBI was at Ruby Ridge, or how corrupt the FBI was in their investigation of Donald Trump, or in their investigation of Hillary Clinton, or what the Woods procedures are, who's Igor Danchenko and why. Like, they don't understand that. Most of them just blindly trust, like IRI suggesting. And that's a huge mistake, because we've had that blind trust, we've seen them become more and more corrupt, to the point where we see them, I think it's something like 2/3 in 2015, it was 2/3 of all terrorist attacks that were foiled were actually concocted by the FBI and FBI informants. We saw, for example, one of the worst situations you could see. What's her name? Pam, I can't remember her name. There was this woman, she used to do the Draw Muhammad contest, right? Like, there was a shooting in Austin, Texas, I believe. An FBI informant radicalized a young Islamic guy, was literally in his car behind that guy as he opened fire on this event, and the FBI agent ran. That shit happens because there has been no accountability for the FBI. And this isn't a recent thing, right? We knew this under Hoover. We could see that the FBI was corrupt. Everybody knew it. They were putting their thumb on the scale of who was elected. So, no, I don't think it's fair to blame the average person. I got to run to the restroom real quick. I'll be right back. But I think you have a question.
IRI, if you want to respond to that. Yeah, and then I have something for IRI. I'll try to wait till you get back.
Yeah, I would just say these instances that Rob has pointed out where people were caught lying to the FBI and, these high profile things, like I think that's a sign of our system working because we are finding out about the bad stuff. And so that gives me even more confidence in these agencies that they're cleaning it up. It's always a work in progress. It's never going to be perfect. But I just think that we have a few high profile incidents and they get all the attention. And we've got these people working to keep us all safe, And I even think the people that do bad stuff, probably 90% of the time, their heart's in the right place too. And they just got wrapped up in something for whatever reason. So I call it naive, call it what you want, but I sleep a lot better at night trusting our law enforcement agencies have at least their heart in the right place.
Okay, I'll try to wait till Rob gets back. So I just want to take a breather for just a minute. Oh yeah,
I'll use the restroom too.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll shout out all the channels and stuff. Make sure you guys go follow IRI on Twitter. Make sure you follow Rob Noerr on Twitter. Make sure you follow Rob Noerr on Twitch. And IRI, I believe, is on YouTube mostly, but he also has Twitch as well. IRI is an abbreviation because it's easier to say. His actual full handle is I'm Really Important or I Am Really Important, one of the two. But you should be able to find him on Twitter at I'm Really Important, and the same for I think his Twitch and YouTube, I think. And then Rob Noerr is I think with two R's, Noerr on
Correct.
Twitter. Yeah, on Twitter and on Twitch. And do you have YouTube? I think you do have YouTube.
Yeah. My show's Normal America with Rob Noerr on YouTube.
But mostly live on Twitch.
Mostly
most of the time.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I was just doing a little shout out while he uses the bathroom. Taking just a little breather.
I had fun tonight. So far, it's going great. I got a lot of debates lined up. I like the one-on-one debates.
Yeah, I like it too. I think it's good. We do have some things in the works though because we want to have obviously we want to have a championship. We wanted this to be the interim, but there's some things we have to work out first because we want to introduce some mechanics like the haymaker, which will be similar to like the cage match.
That's cool.
Because the cage match is inside the panel. For those of you who might not know or haven't seen the American Octagon, the cage match is a mechanic of the panel where everyone in the panel gets one. So we have like a 3v3 or 4v4, and you're allowed to call basically someone into the cage with you, and it's just a 1v1, unmoderated, and you can debate to your heart's intent. As spirited as you want to be without moderation, which I think is pretty cool. And then also the moderator has the ability to call into. So it's similar to that, the idea for the haymaker for the 1v1. But yeah, we'll keep you you wanting for more on that one. So
I just wanted to say real quick, only because I think it's awesome what Sproticus is doing, serving the country and everything. If you ever need help in the meantime, once or twice with like moderation or something like that, if I could help get someone on the show that you want, just let me know. Normally I don't have interest in that sort of stuff, but I think you're doing a really great thing helping them out with it. Like that's awesome. And so, yeah, if you need help with it, just let me know. I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, it's all about the show, man. I'm just here as a placeholder until he gets back, and then obviously this is his baby. I'm just babysitting. Okay. I won't be looking for Jody though. Okay. I'm gonna do my duty. I'm gonna stick by it. Okay. Yeah. So let's see. There was a question. Oh, let me not forget my question. Okay, because obviously my question is much more important than the list, so that's why I get the cut. So IRI, I wanted to wait till Rob was back so that you could both hear and respond. This is a question that I've had that I think is a interesting. This is a more philosophical question, maybe. But do you think that some, especially in the U.S., as much freedoms as we have, do you think that some people maybe view freedom as a burden, whether that's consciously or subconsciously? Because I don't know if you necessarily do. I don't think you do, but just when you say things like Yeah, I would rather, it's kind of a weight off my shoulder if I can trust the FBI, if I can trust the federal government, if I can trust the police, et cetera, et cetera. So, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that freedom is, even subconsciously in some cases, a burden to citizens, especially in a first world country like the U.S.?
Well, I don't know if I would say freedom or rights. I would probably say democracy can be a burden to a lot of people. The fact that you have to be knowledgeable to make decisions. I mean, ideally, but a lot of people look at countries that have a strong man, an authoritarian government, and say, "Well, they're getting stuff done, and I don't got to vote or deal with anything." So maybe that's not so bad. And here in California, we get all these propositions you got to vote on, and they're confusing. You got to vote for judges, and I mean, at some point, people kind of just check out. I think, and unless you get them excited and involved. So I don't know. I don't think rights necessarily are a burden, right? Like freedom of speech or right to bear arms or not have soldiers quartered in your home. But I do think that democracy can be a bit overwhelming, and we're actually seeing the weaknesses in it right now, especially with social media being kind of the Wild West. I'm sure Rob would disagree with me with social media being as free as it is, but I think that we have a lot of freedom in this country, and a lot of you're kind of overwhelmed with choices almost. You don't know who to believe or what to do, and I don't know how we solve that. Honestly, I kind of think about that sometimes.
More speech is better, right? The problem is, right? And the left used to believe this. I'm not saying you don't, but I started college in 2003. I was going to be a journalist, and I had all these left wing professors. And back then they talked about the problem that the majority, 90% of our news was coming from 6 major corporations, right? So you had all these. And so that put a spin on thing what those corporations wanted. The Although social media has many problems, which I talk about quite often, it is a great equalizer. It has the potential to be one of the greatest things that's ever occurred because it gives someone like me and you a voice. I don't know. I mean, IRI is probably more impressive than me. I wouldn't have a voice without these sort of platforms. I wouldn't. So there's a lot of problems that come with it, and there's a lot of negative. But I think when you give more people a voice, it has the potential to actually have a greater understanding of what the truth could be. Right now, it's sort of going off the rails in a lot of ways, but I think that there is potential if we start to have a more fair-minded approach to this, that things could get much better.
Okay. This was a question for Rob. It says, not related to this topic, but given that you are a populist, are you for I don't know how to pronounce this, Myanmar style plan to increase worker business ownership in the U.S.?
Myanmar? Is that what it?
Maybe.
Like
probably MEIDNAR. I don't know if that's how you spell that. Myanmar. Is Myanmar like the worker co-op? And maybe I feel like that's probably maybe what they're hinting at. I'm not sure though.
Okay, yeah.
I'll try to Google it real quick.
So I got to be honest. I can't claim to know exactly what that is. Is this some Vosh fan like making up a word trying to get a gotcha?
Could be. I did have a conversation with Vosh recently, so.
Yeah. So I don't know what that is. The idea of co-ops is that's what we're talking about. I don't have a problem with co-ops. I have a problem with them being forced, but I don't have a problem with a bunch of people that say we want to own our labor and we're going to come together as a co-op and do that. And I think that sometimes burdensome regulations get in the way of that. Let me give you an example. There was a lot of people here in Pennsylvania, that still own hobby farms and things like that. So one of the things that could happen is four of us three here could decide, well, I'll go a third on a cow, and IRI is going to keep this cow on his property, and he's going to milk it every day, and we all get a third of that milk. And then maybe we'll take that milk and we'll sell it otherwise. Well, there were all sorts of laws of where you could travel with that milk, if you could have it over state boundaries and things like that, the pasteurization of it, and all sorts of things that sort of discouraged people from doing those sorts of things. So in general, I'm for less regulation, though I'm not I'm not crazy where I think there should be absolutely no regulations, but I think there's far too burdensome. When it comes to individual workers, like, look, this sets me apart from a lot of conservatives. I think one of the things I like about Tucker Carlson is he, like me, correctly calls out that many times, the establishment Republicans only give a shit about their big corporate donors. I don't care about them. I want a fair environment for all of us. That's what I want. And oftentimes you see Republicans at the establishment level that are unfairly tipping the scale in favor of some of these corporations. So, I think when it comes to populism, there is populism on the left and the right. There certainly is. And I think that we should find those areas of commonality, because I truly believe our system right now is set up where many of us are voiceless, regardless if we're on the left or the right. So maybe that's an area we could find commonality.
Okay. I tried to post a link in your chat, Rob. I don't know if it went through. Your bot yelled at me though.
Yeah, the bot
posting links.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it shared. I don't know anything about that, but I posted
I don't either.
I posted the wiki for like the first thing that I saw, so I think that's what it was supposed to be. I want to say it probably is like something to do with worker co-ops. IRI, if you want to comment on that.
I don't know anything about worker co-ops.
I
don't really look into that. I just kind of deal with what's in front of us, So I don't know. I think I don't really have much to add there.
Okay. Let's see. Let's go through. We got some newer ones, so I'm trying to make sure I go in order based on who was asking first. Let's see. We got those. Yeah, all right, we're basically caught up. All right, the partisan COVID gap continues to get wider. A recent New York Times report states that people in Trump counties are now more than 3 times likely to die of COVID than people in Biden voting counties. Why do the debaters think this is, and what can be done about it?
Well, I mean, there's all sorts of questions of why that'd be the case. Like, first, you have to see how that data was collected and if that data is accurate or not. Let's assume that it is, though. So just for the sake of argument, well, I don't think IRI would disagree with me. I think traditionally, Republicans and Trump voters tend to swing older, right? Like younger people tend to vote more Democrat. So you might see when we know that one of the biggest factors is age, right? If you have a bunch of people that are Trump voters that are 70 years old or 75 years old, they're probably, the areas they live, they're probably more likely to actually suffer the consequences of that. It could be because of the health decisions they're making. It could be because the vaccine actually does stop you from being having significant effects. That could be the case. And I just want to take this moment to say, I don't know. It's hard because we can't trust, because it's been politicized so bad. What's happened at our CDC and with other medical professionals and scientists and people like Fauci, it's all about power for them. And so people rightfully don't trust them. But that doesn't mean that I'm an anti-vaxxer or don't think the vaccine works. I don't know. I'm just against the mandate. You shouldn't be able to mandate what the medications that people take in that manner. But it could be that people in Trump counties are less likely to get the vaccine and therefore they're more likely to die. It could be those people tend to be older, but there's all sorts of combinations of reasons why that could be. But yeah, that's the best I have, I guess, on it.
Well, I would just say that blue areas tended to take the pandemic more seriously, and that here in California, for example, we're still wearing masks. I mean, Los Angeles County just came out with a new mandate that like you have to wear them in restaurants, and so most of the country, from what I've heard, I haven't traveled, is like not wearing masks at all, and I would be kind of shocked if I saw that as someone who lives in Los Angeles. So I think that contributed to it. We're more open to vaccine mandates as well, and we don't seem to have a problem with that. But I would add another wrinkle, that a lot of Trump territory, a lot of Trump country is rural, and the hospital systems in rural areas are lacking and get overwhelmed pretty easily. And so I think that it kind of exposes some of the problems with our healthcare system as well. And I hope we can help fix that as well. I mean, one thing in Biden's Build Back Better plan, if they pass it, would be to expand Medicaid in these 12 Republican-controlled states that haven't taken advantage of the ACA expansion from 2010, and providing health care to millions of people, and the poorest and the most destitute. So I think that's one way to start helping out a lot of people. But yeah, I don't know. Tough to say.
And just real quick on that rural idea, this is one of the problems with like these statistics, because I'd have to see the statistics. Are we talking overall? Right? Because I think that probably another factor is a lot of cities got hit hardest first, right? So a lot of people that were in those stages that had the most comorbidities, like 75 plus population and things like that. A lot of those people ended up sadly passing away early, or at least big percentages of them. And so if you see, we're seeing this right now, like, why is it that Florida looks like the best state right now when 2 months ago it looked like California was one of the best states? What has to do with seasonality and when this virus comes through? So if you have places like rural America, and this is just anecdotal from my point, COVID wasn't a big deal where I live in rural America. And then it seemed like, oh, it went through Philly, it went through Pittsburgh. Now we're seeing it here. But we didn't really have it come through as bad that first wave. So it could have something to do with that. It's hard to make definitive claims when it's probably a myriad of things that's going on that would lead to that.
Okay. And then I think this will probably be our last question. Unless you guys want to go a little bit longer, we've gone for a decent amount of time. Do you think it's the civic duty of any citizen to defend their local economy from destruction? And I guess that's posed to both of you guys. So
I'm assuming this is like Rittenhouse
I
related.
feel like it. Yeah, it seems that way. Yeah.
Civic duty is a strong thing to say, right? Because then it implies that you are obligated to do something. I think you have the right to defend your local community from being attacked. I absolutely do. I don't know that you have the duty to do so. In general, my take on Rittenhouse is real simple. It is a tragedy that it was politicized by the establishment, the Democratic Party, and the media. These riots that occurred over and over, Democratic areas encouraged police to stand down to allow the riots to occur. I knew what this meant. I knew that inevitably we would see Americans fighting Americans, possibly with lethal force, because law enforcement was not being involved. And we did not see any cultural stop to this because the people that control our narrative continue to say it's mostly peaceful. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. So inevitably, people would get tired of their communities being destroyed and they would fight back. I just thank God that it was only basically these one or two incidents where it happened. It's a tragedy that Rittenhouse was put in the position where he felt like he had to defend this community because the police and the local law enforcement and government let him down. And it'll happen again. If he's found innocent, which he should, we're going to see riots again, and it's disgusting and terrible. And until all sides can agree that violence and rioting is not an acceptable form of protest, you will see this occur over and over again.
Yeah, actually, I share some of Rob's sentiment with the position Kyle was put into. And this is not popular for me to say this, but I think Kyle is a victim in this, in the regard that he was convinced he needed to go out there and defend these businesses in that community, that he did not have trust in the police, or he did not feel that law enforcement could handle it to the degree that he was hoping for whatever reason. And I think that's a failure of community. And us as a society should really reflect on that, why a minor chose to go out there and play cop, in a sense. And, you could have your reasons why you support what he did or what he didn't do, but I don't think any of us would be excited for 17-year-olds to be walking around city streets defending buildings. You know what I mean? Like, something's gone wrong in the world if some 17-year-old feels the duty to do that. So I don't think people should do that. I mean, I don't think things were at that point where a couple of people out there with guns was going to make a difference. I think it complicated things. I think it caused more chaos. I'm really sad the whole thing happened. You know what I mean? I won't get into the self-defense or any of that stuff, but I just that has been the hardest thing for me for this whole Kyle Rittenhouse thing, is that that he thought he had to go out there and do that. And I think we should think about that some more.
When I think that, like, look, we have our disagreements and things like that, but regardless of where you send, there is no way. We'll see if you agree with this. I know I've talked on panels with AmericanNacho on this. I condemn all political violence in today's world. I do. I think IRI and AmericanNacho would all agree there are things politically that we are very passionate about. None of those rise to the level that we should start engaging in violence. And so I think that I hope you agree with that, IRI. I think that it's just until we set the groundwork for, like, look, violence is off the table. I don't care about the Boston Tea Party. I don't care about the civil rights movement. In our society right now, violence is off the table. And I think if we start there, that's a good place to bring our country back together. We could then have spirited debates, arguments, all sorts of things, other tactics that we could say you could do, but no violence.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think us sitting here talking like this shows people that it's not my side versus your side. We're both Americans. We both care about this country. We both have the same goals. We have some different ideas on how to get there. And so I'm with you. I don't think there's ever an excuse for violence. And I'm sad to see a lot of the things that have happened over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think this was really good time. We had some really spirited debate there at the beginning for the majority of it, and then there at the end we found some common ground here and there. So yeah, I think that was pretty awesome. And obviously, I am the true winner of this debate. No, you guys watching at home are the true winners. Okay, thanks for hanging out. There was a lot of chat back and forth, especially in my chat. I love seeing all the lefties in there as well, yelling at all the righties and vice versa. I love the diversity. Okay, I think that's the most important diversity is diversity of intellect, and that's I think the goal. Okay, so yeah, if you guys want to shout yourselves out, tell us where to find you. Tell us anything you want to say in closing, and we'll wrap this thing up. Go ahead, IRI. I think Rob opened, so yeah, go ahead, IRI.
Okay. Yeah, I want to say thanks for hosting this, American Nacho. Please, people in my community, give American Nacho a follow. Give Rob a follow. I love engaging with people that don't see things the way I do, and I do it to try to understand where they're coming from. I did not come into this debate thinking I was going to convince Rob on anything. The goal for me was what I said a few moments ago, to show people that we can disagree and we can still get along and have respect for each other and try to at least understand where the other person's coming from a little bit. And that's the best we can do. Now, Rob and I are both entertainers, so we amplified things up a bit, for the sake of debate and to keep people engaged and interested. But I think Rob's a really interesting guy, and I'm glad he's here on the platform. And I hope to get to know him some more. So thanks, Rob, for spending a couple hours with me. And I look forward to future talks.
Yeah. You want me just to go, Don? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. I was muted.
I had a great time tonight. I love the one-on-one debates. It's even when we disagree in serious ways, it's far less hostile than the panels. The panel, it's just set up to, so I enjoy this. And I really enjoy talking to people, even if I disagree or putting forth intelligent opinions, which I think was fair to say in here. Even if I massively disagree, it's nice to be able to do that. That's how you that's my advice to people. I shouldn't give advice. Let me put it this way. You will strengthen your positions by seeking out the best possible people that disagree with you, right? You might change your position, but you might also strengthen your position because you're able to have a competent person checking it. It's like a sword. You're sharpening yourself. So I enjoy this. It's not about winning or losing or anything like that to me. I'm competitive. I try to put my best foot forward, but I always get more out of a discussion like this than almost anything else I do because I know that there's someone that's not just kissing my butt. That's like, no, I think you're wrong. Here's why. And to me, that's great. It seems to me like debate and arguments became dirty word. I debated in college. I loved it. Like me and my friends, if we start having beers, we're debating about like who is the best center ever to wear the number 63. We enjoy that stuff. It's not a bad thing. So you can see that you can disagree with people. It doesn't mean you hate them or anything like that. And I think these lead to worthwhile conversations. You can find me at Normal America with Rob Noerr on YouTube or on Twitch. I stream almost every evening, all times Eastern, start around 8 p.m. Almost every weekday. And that's Rob Noerr, ROBNOERR, at Twitch TV. I'll be debating Counterpoints next week. I'll be debating Destiny the week after that. So it should be fun.
Awesome. Thank you guys again for showing up. I had a great time, and you guys made it really easy for me to moderate. So thank you.
You did great, Nacho. And by the way, again, special shout out to Sprouticus, and thank you so much for stepping in and helping them. That's really cool.
Yeah. This is all for for the spirit of the show. So this is just to keep the show going while Sprout is away. I love me and Sprout had talked about when he came up with the name for the American Octagon and the idea for having the panel and all this stuff, and so I had always been behind Sprout and in his corner for that. So now that he's not going to be here for it, he was called away to active duty. More than willing to step in and moderate until he comes back. So yeah, awesome. We hope to keep the spirit of the show going, and yeah. So thanks again, you guys, for showing up. And
we'll talk to you both soon.
To you guys soon. Yeah.
Take it easy. See you later.
All right.
Yep.